Chapter 186. Berserker. These people were not weak. The strongest one was a man in a greenish-gray battle suit. The man held a saber in his hand. Every slash was enough to force the lion-type blood fiend back and leave a large wound on its body. Without a doubt, this man was a berserker. Stop! Seeing that the lion-type blood fiend was about to be completely destroyed under the attacks of this group of people, Gray hurriedly stopped them. He also ordered the ox-type blood fiends and crocodile-type blood fiends to help the lion-type blood fiend. Who is it? Oh no, retreat! Suddenly hearing someone shout, the group of people besieging the lion-type blood fiend looked in the direction of the voice. The next moment, their facial expressions changed. Thump, thump, thump. Two blood fiends that were at least 4 meters long were violently charging toward them. Their footsteps made violent sounds as they landed on the ground. Just from the sound of their running, one could feel the strength of these two blood fiends. Retreat, retreat. Under the leadership of the man in the greenish-gray battle suit, these people abandoned the lion-type blood fiends without hesitation and retreated to the side vigilantly. They only stopped when they confirmed that there was no one chasing after them. After driving these people away, Gray walked to the side of the lion-type blood fiend. After sizing it up, he could not help but frown slightly. The attack of the man in the greenish-gray battle suit was extremely powerful. There were many places on the lion-type blood fiend's body that revealed deep white bones. He could not help but raise his head and look at these people with dissatisfaction. Seeing Gray's dissatisfied gaze, these people could not help but show a dignified expression. It was because Gray's appearance was too grand. They had hunted blood fiends for many years and were very familiar with blood fiend. They had already recognized that the 4 blood fiends following Gray were all berserker-level blood fiend. How could a person with 4 berserker-level blood fiends not make them feel dignified? The man in the greenish-gray suit gritted his teeth, walked out of the crowd, and apologized to Gray. "Hello, we are from the Red Wing. We are really sorry. We did not know that these were your battle beasts." Red Wing? Gray raised his eyebrows. He had never heard of this mercenary group. This mercenary group should be a mercenary group outside of Marquis Sidney's territory. If he was in Sidney's territory, there was no way he wouldn't have heard of a mercenary group led by a berserker. This also proved that he had left Marquis Sidney's territory. "We are willing to compensate you for our mistake just now. This is our apology, please accept it." Seeing that Gray's attitude was unclear, the man in green thought for a moment and gestured behind him. Immediately, a woman in red walked out from behind him with a leather bag in her hand and walked towards Gray. Gray took the leather bag while keeping his guard up against the woman. He took a look inside and saw that it was full of magic coins. Judging from the weight, there should be more than 100 magic coins, which would be more than 10,000 gold coins. "I accept your apologies," Gray said as he put away the leather bag. Since the other party had apologized and compensated him, he naturally couldn't pursue them. He couldn't possibly take their lives just because they had injured the lion-type blood beast, could he? Besides, the other party's strength was not weak. Judging from the previous battle, among the dozen people, the man in green was a berserker. Among the remaining people, at least 7 or 8 were berserker. Although this strength was slightly weaker than Gray's, who had 4 berserker blood beasts, it wasn't too far off. After all, Gray's berserker blood beasts couldn't use their blood beast abilities. In terms of combat strength, they couldn't be compared to real berserker blood beasts. Gray nodded to the other party. Under the protection of the 4 berserker blood beasts, he turned and left. Soon, he disappeared into the forest. "Phew, I almost thought there was going to be a conflict. Who is this person? He actually has 4 berserker blood beasts following him." Seeing that Gray's figure had completely disappeared, the dozen or so people couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Facing a person with 4 berserker blood beasts, the pressure was not ordinary. "Captain, these 4 blood beasts don't seem to be combat beasts. The woman who handed the leather bag to Gray frowned slightly and said to the man in green, "Yes." The man in green nodded. "If I'm not mistaken, these 4 blood beasts should be dead. They are controlled by the corpse controlling ability of the corpse ape." Corpse ape? The kind of blood beast that can control corpses? The woman looked surprised. "Yes, it's that kind of blood beast. The other party either has a demonic weapon or cultivates the blood technique of the corpse ape," the man in the grayish-green battlesuit said. Seeing that the lion-type blood beast was injured, he thought that it was an injured berserker blood beast. Therefore, he prepared to hunt it down. However, after the battle, he quickly discovered the abnormality of the lion-type blood beast. Since there was no way out, he could only continue the battle. "It's time to go back." After returning to the open space in the forest where the tent was set up, Gray let the 4 blood beasts guard the perimeter and put the previous matter aside. His corpse controlling ability had been raised to the maximum. At most, it could increase his individual combat strength. In general, his corpse controlling ability had almost reached its limit. He had basically achieved his goal of coming to the Red Leaf Forest, and it was time to go back. "I have obtained a lot of blood this time. What blood should I choose for the next transformation?" Gray directly gave up on the blood of the berserker blood beast. Since he could choose the blood of the berserker blood beast, he naturally couldn't choose the berserker blood beast. Blood beasts had their strength. After consuming the berserker blood beast, the strength of the berserker blood beast would reach the berserker level. After consuming the berserker blood beast, the strength of the berserker blood beast would reach the berserker level. In comparison, consuming the berserker blood beast was naturally more cost-effective, unless it was an extremely powerful ability that could be used even when one was at the berserker level. The corpse controlling ability and the iron arm of the steel-armed ape were obviously such abilities. Therefore, he chose to consume them. Lion-type blood beast that can control flames? Crocodile-type blood beast that can control soil? Bull-type blood beast that has great strength and strong defense? Or a leopard-type blood beast with terrifying speed? Obviously, with the blood types that he had mastered, if he had to choose, he could only choose between these 4 blood beasts. Leopard-type blood beast? After pondering for a moment, Glenn raised his eyebrows. Among the 4 blood beasts, the leopard-type blood beast was the most unique. Gray estimated that the leopard-type blood beast's speed was definitely faster than the gale wolf. If he consumed the leopard-type blood beast's blood, his speed would be unmatched among those of the same level. As for the other 3 blood beasts, their abilities could only be considered sparse and ordinary. One could control flames, one could control soil, and one could only be considered average with thick skin and thick flesh. It's a pity that there are no special abilities like the corpse controlling ability. After tasting the sweetness of the corpse controlling ability, Gray yearned for special abilities. However, he also knew that special abilities were not easy to come across. Moreover, blood beasts with special abilities were quite powerful. Although he had 4 berserk-level blood beasts, if he really encountered a berserk-level blood beast with special abilities, he might not be able to kill it. After resting for a night, Gray packed up everything the next day and prepared to return. However, at this moment, he noticed that the dozen people that he met yesterday evening were heading toward the empty field. He showed a trace of doubt on his face, and ordered the 4 berserk-level blood beasts to protect him while he waited for the arrival of the other party. "Your Excellency!" The other party stopped when they were 30 meters away from Gray. Among them, a man in a green-gray battlesuit walked out and spoke to Gray. "What's the matter?" Gray remained alert and asked. "Sorry to disturb you, but we have a cooperation to discuss with you," the man in the green-gray suit said. "Cooperation?" Gray sized up the man in the green-gray suit and asked. "What kind of cooperation?" "In fact, we found a jasper lizard. However, with our abilities, it is quite difficult to hunt it down. Therefore, we would like to cooperate with you to hunt it down." The man in the green-gray suit hurriedly said. Jasper Lizard? Upon hearing this type of blood beast, Gray's eyes lit up. The Jasper Lizard was a berserk-level blood beast with plant abilities. If that was all, Gray's eyes would not have lit up. The special thing about this type of blood beast was that it seemed to have the bloodline of a dragon. Although it was very shallow, it was enough to make this type of blood beast a powerful existence among its peers. Not only did it have great strength, speed, and defense, but its plant abilities were also quite powerful among berserk-level blood beasts. Moreover, the most special thing about this type of blood beast was that it could absorb the life of plants and nourish itself, allowing it to recover quickly. If he could really hunt this type of blood beast, it would be a better choice than the leopard-type blood beast. At the thought of this, Gray looked sharply at the man in the green-gray suit. Chapter 187. The blood belongs to us, and the corpse belongs to you. We will not destroy the head when we attack. Hearing that Gray was interested, the man in the grayish-green battlesuit heaved a sigh of relief. Although he was confident, he could not be sure that the other party would agree. If Gray did not agree, then they would have to give up on the hunt. After all, with the Red Wing's combat strength, killing normal blood fiends of the berserk level was not a problem. However, hunting special blood fiends was beyond their capabilities. Gray's pupils suddenly shrank. From the distribution plan proposed by the other party should have seen the origin of his corpse control ability. Otherwise, he would not have said things like, "The corpse belongs to you," and "Do not destroy the head." After all, it was daytime. It was easy to see the difference between a blood fiend controlled by the corpse control ability and a normal blood fiend. As a mercenary, the other party must have seen a lot of blood fiends. It was normal for him to recognize the white-haired ape-type blood fiend. After understanding this, Gray calmed down and asked, "You saw the origin of my ability?" "Yes. If I'm not wrong, your ability should be to control the corpse of a corpse ape." The man in the grayish-green battle suit nodded. "So that type of blood fiend is called a corpse ape." The man in the grayish-green battlesuit's words made Gray finally understand the type of blood fiend. However, he did not show it on his face. "Not enough. The corpse is not enough. In addition, I will compensate you with 50,000 gold coins," the man in the grayish-green battlesuit said after some consideration. "In addition, 10 portions of the blood of the Jasper Lizard." Gray said, "Okay, deal." The man in the grayish-green battlesuit nodded without hesitation. He did not ask why Gray wanted the blood of the Jasper Lizard. The blood of blood fiends was often used in alchemy, especially the blood of special blood fiends. It was normal for Gray to need it. In the lush forest, 2 groups of people were moving forward. One group was made up of more than 10 men and women, while the other group was made up of 1 person and 4 blood fiends. Although they were traveling together, the 2 groups kept a clear distance from each other and were wary of each other. From time to time, there would be gazes sizing Gray up. Their gazes were filled with curiosity, as well as a trace of fear. They were curious about Gray's ability to control the blood fiends' corpses. They were curious about Gray's young age, and they were fearful of Gray's strength. Although they didn't know exactly how old Gray was, it was obvious that he wasn't too old. Most of them were only mid-level blood warriors when they were Gray's age. While these people were sizing them up, Gray was also sizing them up. A mercenary group led by a berserker. This mercenary group's scale couldn't be considered small, but it wasn't clear if the other party had a noble background. Although nobles had a unique identity and enjoyed many privileges, not all families and forces would flock to them. Regional restrictions meant that the status of nobles was only effective in certain areas. Once they left this area, they would be no different from ordinary people. In addition, after becoming a noble, they were bound to serve the upper nobles. To a certain extent, their life and death were in the hands of the upper nobles. Because of these 2 reasons, not all families and forces wanted to become a noble family. Such families would be considered to have deviated from the orthodox and would generally be looked down upon by the nobles. Of course, contempt was contempt. In fact, these two groups often cooperated with each other. The nobles needed mercenary groups to hunt blood fiends for them and obtain blood fiends' blood and various kinds of leather. On the other hand, mercenaries needed to earn money from the nobles to cover their various expenses. After walking for a few miles, the group of people suddenly stopped. Seeing them like this, Gray stopped as well. "Sir, the jade lizard is not far ahead." The man in the greenish-gray battle suit spoke to Gray with a cautious gaze. Gray nodded, a trace of caution in his eyes. Although he had 4 blood fiends under his control, he couldn't use the blood fiend's abilities. He didn't have the confidence to hunt special blood fiends. It was because of this that he chose to cooperate with the Red Wing. Otherwise, he could have waited for the Red Wing to give up and leave before slowly searching the area. Even with his current strength, he didn't have the confidence to hunt the blood fiends, let alone the Red Wing. Therefore, if he refused, the Red Shirt mercenary group would definitely give up. The group tried their best not to make too much noise as they slowly moved forward. However, there were 4 blood fiends in the group and it was destined that they couldn't be completely silent. After all, it was too difficult for a blood fiend to move through the dense foliage of the forest without making any noise. Rustle! 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 Not far away, the sound of trees shaking violently could be heard. It was as if a huge monster was coming this way. "It found us. It's coming for us." Gray and the rest knew that it was almost impossible to not be discovered with a blood fiend following them. Therefore, they had already expected a huge monster to come. Even so, some of the Red Wing members still had a trace of panic on their faces. After all, it was a mad-class blood fiend, and a special one at that. Woo! A majestic cry was heard and all the animals in the surrounding forest fled in panic. Then, a huge monster appeared. It was a huge monster that was more than 5 meters long and covered in green scales. Its head was sharp and triangular, and its 4 legs were as thick and strong as buckets. Its body was thick and sturdy. Spread out and wait for an opportunity to attack. The man in green armor had a dignified look on his face. After instructing his teammates, he turned to Gray and requested, "Sir, please let your blood fiends entangle it." "Understood." Gray nodded. Since he had agreed, he naturally wouldn't slack off. In terms of urgency, he was more concerned about the Jasper lizard than the Red Wing members. He immediately ordered the Ox-type and Crocodile-type blood fiends to charge at the Jasper lizard from the front while the Lion-type and Leopard-type blood fiends charged at the Jasper lizard from the side. Thump! 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 The 4 blood fiends rampaged and broke many trees as they charged at the Jasper lizard. Finally, the 2 sides collided. The Ox-type blood fiend was the first to engage the Jasper lizard. It lowered its head and revealed 2 sharp horns as it charged at the Jasper lizard. Bang! Facing the charging Ox-type blood fiend, the Jade lizard quickly twisted its body. Relying on its speed that was faster than the Ox-type blood fiend, it avoided the 2 horns of the Ox-type blood fiend and then slammed its head into the side of the Ox-type blood fiend. Bang! The Ox-type blood fiend was sent flying, and the area where it was hit was obviously damaged. The Ox-type blood fiend was good at strength and defense, and was not weaker than the Jasper lizard in terms of strength. However, the Jasper lizard relied on its speed to avoid the Ox-type blood fiend's head-on collision. Whoosh! At this moment, an ear-piercing sound of metal rubbing against each other was heard. The Leopard-type blood fiend suddenly approached the Jasper lizard and clawed at it. However, its claws scratched the Jasper lizard's body as if it was scratching a steel plate. It only left a shallow wound, and only a little bit of dark red blood flowed out. As a Leopard-type blood fiend, it was faster than the Jasper lizard in terms of movement speed. Before the Jasper lizard could react, it had already approached the Jasper lizard. This showed how fast it was. However, its weakness was its strength, while the jasper lizard was good at defense and was equally powerful. As a result, its attack only caused minor injuries to the jasper lizard. The lion-type blood fiend, which was one step slower, was much more powerful even though it was not as fast as the leopard-type blood fiend. It left 4 deep scratches on the jasper lizard's body, causing dark red blood to flow out continuously. At this moment, the crocodile-type blood fiend arrived. It opened its bloody mouth and bit one of the jasper lizard's legs, causing blood to flow out. Seeing this, the Red Wing immediately attacked. A man in a greenish-gray battlesuit suddenly appeared beside the jasper lizard and slashed at by Yushi's body, leaving a deep wound on the jasper lizard's body. On the other hand, the mercenaries of the Red Wing who had reached the vicious blood warrior level either used their blood fiend abilities to attack the jasper lizard or attacked it from the side, leaving shallow wounds on its body. In this first confrontation, Gray's side had the upper hand. However, Gray did not relax because of this. The battle had just begun. Facing 4 blood fiends of the same level, a berserker, and several vicious blood warriors, it was normal for the jasper lizard to be injured. Furthermore, the jasper lizard had yet to use its blood fiend abilities, while his 4 blood fiends did not have any. To determine which side had the upper hand, he would have to wait until the jasper lizard used its blood fiend abilities. He continued to observe. Woo, the injured jasper lizard roared. Then, with it as the center, the surrounding plants started to tremble. Countless trees started to move like animals. Thick vines that looked like tentacles suddenly sprouted from the ground. Some branches suddenly elongated and bent, their tips becoming sharp. Dozens of vines shot toward the crocodile-type blood fiend that was biting the jasper lizard. The vines wrapped around the crocodile-type blood fiend and bound it completely, helping the jasper lizard to break free from the crocodile-type blood fiend's bite. Most of the plants attacked the other 3 blood fiends and the Red Wing. Bang bang! Apart from the leopard-type blood fiend that managed to dodge the vines due to its speed, the lion-type blood fiends and the ox-type blood fiends were all hit. The lion-type blood fiend was struck by a thick vine and was sent flying. The ox-type blood fiend was pierced by the plant javelins, piercing through its skin and into its flesh. These plants were controlled by the jasper lizard's blood fiend abilities. Their strength and sharpness were comparable to that of real steel. Even the ox-type blood fiend, which had strong defense, was injured. On the other hand, the Red Wing's side did not receive the jasper lizard's attention because of the 4 blood fiends' gigantic bodies. Even so, some of them were still injured. One of them could not dodge in time and was sent flying by a vine. He immediately vomited blood and was seriously injured. Another person's thigh was pierced by a branch and nailed to the ground. Chapter 188. What a powerful blood fiend ability! Gray, who was far away from the battle, was not attacked. However, his eyes were filled with surprise and anticipation. He was surprised by the power of the Jade Lizard Blood Fiend and was looking forward to using this powerful Blood Fiend ability as his trump card after consuming its blood. Despite his surprise and anticipation, Gray did not stop commanding the 4 Blood Fiends. He commanded the Lion-type Blood Fiend to bite off the vines that were entangling the Crocodile Blood Fiend, and the Leopard-type Blood Fiend to remove the plants that had turned into sharp blades and pierced the Ox-type Blood Fiend. Soon, the 4 Blood Fiends attacked the Jade Lizard again. Not only the 4 Blood Fiends, but the man in the greenish-gray battlesuit and the other members of the Red Wing also used various methods to attack the Jade Lizard. Rustle! Rustle! Facing their attacks, the Jade Lizard controlled the plants to counterattack. The vines either entangled or turned into sharp weapons and pierced forward. However, compared to when it first used its ability to control plants, the Jade Lizard's attacks were obviously weaker. The current attack was equivalent to a weaker version of the previous attack. It seems that the initial level of plant control consumed a lot of the Jade Lizard's energy. Seeing this, Gray was deep in thought. When the Jade Lizard first used its ability to control plants, its power was simply too outrageous. Facing the siege of 4 blood fiends, a berserk blood warrior, and several ferocious blood warriors, the jade lizard still managed to emerge victorious. Its power was simply too strong. Since it did not use its ability again after using it, it seemed that such an attack consumed a lot of energy. Even the jade lizard could not use it continuously. Whoosh! The leopard-type blood fiend with terrifying speed avoided the obstacles of the plants and approached the jade lizard. Slash! Its sharp claws scratched the jade lizard's body, leaving a bloody wound. Woo! Enraged, the jade lizard twisted its body and whipped its thick tail at the leopard-type blood fiend. The leopard-type blood fiend nimbly dodged the tail and continued to fight with the jade lizard. Chi. The man in the greenish-gray battle-suit's battle saber was wrapped in green light. With one slash, the vines that were attacking him were easily cut off. Then, he broke through the blockade, approached the jade lizard's side, and slashed at it with his saber. Puff! The battle saber slashed at the jade lizard's body. Accompanied by a green light, the saber slashed into the lizard's body and sank deep into the lizard's body. Immediately, the lizard started bleeding. As a berserker who wielded a magic weapon, even if he hadn't used his ability as a blood fiend, his battle prowess was already stronger than any of the 4 blood fiends Gray controlled. Woo! Compared to the leopard-type blood fiend's injuries, the man's attack could clearly be considered a serious injury. The jade lizard howled in pain and anger. It turned around and bit at the man in the grayish-green battle armor. The man in the grayish-green battle armor held his saber and fought with it. With the leopard-type blood fiend and the man in the greenish-gray battle suit restraining the jade lizard's control over the plants in the other areas immediately weakened. Dong, dong, dong. The ox-type, lion-type, and crocodile-type blood fiends immediately broke through the blockade and rushed toward the jade lizard. The other mercenaries of the Red Wing also broke through the blockade and rushed over. Poof, poof, poof. Faced with the siege of 4 blood fiends, a berserker, and several ferocious blood warriors, the jade lizard's injuries gradually worsened. Seeing that the jade lizard was seriously injured and exhausted, the man in the grayish-green battle armor let out a low growl and his expression became solemn. Whoosh! Then, red light gathered on his back and suddenly formed 2 red wings on his back. With a flap of his wings, he left the ground and flew up. Swoosh, swoosh. Suddenly, 2 rays of fiery red light appeared on both sides of his wings and transformed into 2 flaming sharp blades that slashed toward the jade lizard. Woo! The jade lizard instinctively felt danger, but it was already exhausted and entangled with the blood fiends. It couldn't dodge in time. Chi. The 2 rays of fiery red light, with scorching heat, left 2 huge gashes on the jade lizard's body. The area around the gashes was charred black. The jade lizard was seriously injured and on the verge of death. It was already seriously injured and now it was attacked by a berserker's blood fiend ability. The jade lizard was on the verge of death. A fire-type bird-type blood fiend? While commanding the 4 blood fiends to continue attacking the jade lizard, Gray had a look of realization. Seeing the red wings on the man in the grayish-green battle armor and the 2 rays of flames, he understood why this mercenary group was called the Red Wing. He also understood the type of blood technique that the man in the grayish-green battle armor practiced. There was no doubt that the blood technique that he practiced was a fire-type bird-type blood technique. The wings on his back were because after reaching the level of a berserker could use the power of blood to construct a part of the blood fiend's body characteristic. For example, the blood fiend's sharp claws, tail, horn, and so on could be used as a means of attack or movement. As for what kind of blood technique one could construct, it depended on the type of blood technique that one practiced. The man in the grayish-green battle armor had clearly constructed the wings of a bird. The 4 blood fiends attacked the jade lizard fiercely and were about to kill it. However, at this moment, Woo! The jade lizard, which was so severely injured that it could barely stand, suddenly howled. Then, a strange scene appeared. With the jade lizard as the center, all the plants within a 100-meter radius emitted a green glow. After these rays of light appeared, they quickly converged and surged towards the jade lizard like water flowing downwards. As the green glow gathered, the numerous wounds on the jade lizard's body quickly healed. In a few seconds, it had completely recovered and there were no longer any signs of injury. Crack, crack, crack. In contrast, the surrounding trees all withered and their leaves fell as if they had all withered and died. Reverse feeding. Seeing this, Gray narrowed his eyes and immediately understood what had happened. According to the introduction in the book, the jade lizard could not only control plants but also absorb the life of plants to nourish itself. Obviously, the other party had done this just now and absorbed the life of the plants within a 100-meter radius to accelerate its recovery. Thump, thump, thump. Although it had recovered, the jade lizard clearly knew how powerful its opponent was. After recovering, it immediately turned and fled in a direction. Stop it, don't let it escape this area. The man in the greenish-gray battle suit with wings on his back shouted as he chased after the jade lizard. Gray did not need the other party's reminder as he had already done so. Now that all the plants in this area had died, the jade lizard could not use reverse feeding or control the plant. It could be said that this was the most advantageous battlefield for them. Naturally, they could not let the jade lizard escape. Whoosh! The leopard blood fiend exploded with terrifying speed and blocked the jade lizard's path in an instant. It pounced on the jade lizard's body. Bang! The jade lizard twisted its body and flung the leopard blood fiend away. However, at this moment, the winged man in the greenish-gray battle suit had arrived and blocked the jade lizard's path. He slashed his saber at the jade lizard. Poof! Injuries appeared on the jade lizard's body again. The man in the greenish-gray battle suit was sent flying along with his saber. In terms of strength, he was not as strong as the jade lizard. However, because of his and the wind-chasing leopard's obstruction, the ox-type, lion-type, and crocodile-type blood fiends had arrived. The lion-type blood fiend scratched the jade lizard's body and left a clear bloody wound. The ox-type blood fiend lowered its head and revealed its horns. It knocked the jade lizard to the side, causing it to stagger and a hole to appear in its body. The crocodile-type blood fiend bit the jade lizard's left front leg. A similar battle took place again. However, this time, the jade lizard could not use its plant ability or reverse feeding, so its threat was greatly reduced. As the attacks continued, wounds began to appear on his body, which had already recovered from his injuries. Chapter 189. Seeing that the jade lizard was dead, the men of the Red Wing hurried forward to collect the blood, while Gray summoned the 4 blood fiends back to him. Guarding against the Red Wing was one thing, but the other was to think about which blood fiend he should remove his control over. After the battle just now, the 4 blood fiends must have sustained a lot of injuries. Fortunately, Gray had been controlling the ox-type and crocodile-type blood fiends to fight the jade lizard head-on, while the lion-type and leopard-type blood fiends, which were weaker in defense, attacked from the sides. The injuries on the 4 blood fiends did not affect their combat ability. This was also one of the benefits of corpse control. As long as the head was not destroyed and the 4 legs were not chopped off, the combat ability of the controlled blood fiends would not be reduced too much. Which blood fiend should I remove my control over? Gray raised his eyebrows. First of all, the ox-type blood fiend could not be removed. It had great strength and strong defense, making it an extremely qualified meat shield. Secondly, the leopard-type blood fiend could not be removed either. Although it had weak attack and defense, it was fast and could be used in many situations. For example, just now, the leopard-type blood fiend was able to catch up with the jade lizard, which bought time for the man in the greenish-gray battle suit and the other 3 blood fiends. Otherwise, with the speed of the jade lizard, the man in the greenish-gray battle suit might not be able to catch up with it, but the ox-type blood fiend and the other 2 blood fiends would definitely not be able to catch up. Now, only the crocodile-type blood fiends and the lion-type blood fiends were left. Among these two blood fiends, the crocodile-type blood fiend had strong defense and a strong biting ability. Once it bit its opponent, it would be difficult for the opponent to break free. The lion-type blood fiend, on the other hand, was quite balanced in all aspects. It had neither strong nor weak point. Lion-type blood fiend. The answer was obvious. Among the four blood fiends, the lion-type blood fiend was the least distinctive and would be of the least help in battle. After thinking about these things, the Red Wing had finished collecting the blood. The man in the greenish-gray battle suit walked over. Beside him was a woman in a red battle suit. "Sir, here are the promised 10 portions of jade lizard blood and 50,000 gold coins." Knowing that Gray was quite afraid of him, a berserker, the man in the azure-gray battle suit stood more than 20 meters away from Gray, and then let the woman in the red battle suit come forward and give the things in the previous agreement to Gray. Gray reached out and took it. There were a total of 2 items, a bronze bottle containing the jade lizard's blood and a leather bag containing a large amount of magic coins. He was indeed quite wary of the man in green-gray battle armor. He had not forgotten how the latter had killed the corpse ape back then. After approaching the corpse ape, before it could control the blood fiends, the former had launched a sneak attack and killed it with lightning speed. He didn't want what happened to the corpse ape to happen to him. "Sir, the Red Wing is based in Mercenary City. If you have time in the future, please come and be our guest." Nodding to Gray, the man in the green-gray battle armor left with the Red Wing mercenary group. Gray looked in the direction in which the other party had left. After confirming that the other party had left, he removed the control of the lion-type blood fiend and walked to the corpse of the jade lizard. A few minutes later, trembling, the jade lizard stood up. Not bad. After instructing the jade lizard to move its body, Gray nodded in satisfaction. Although there were many injuries on its body, these injuries did not affect its movement and did not affect the jade lizard's combat strength much. The jade lizard was extremely strong in terms of speed, strength, and defense. In terms of combat strength, it was stronger than the other 3 blood fiends. After controlling it, it immediately became the strongest blood fiend under his control. A week later, Gray returned to the forest near Fergus Castle that hid the underground entrance. It seems that the jade lizard can only stay here. Gray lifted the cover of the dried branches and glanced at the entrance to the basement. Looking at the size of the 4 blood fiends, he helplessly discovered that the largest of the 4 blood fiends, the jade lizard, was unable to pass through the tunnel. It's good that it stays here. It can guard this entrance so that the Fergus family won't know that someone has infiltrated. After thinking for a while, Gray led the other 3 blood fiends into the tunnel. This entrance led directly to Fergus Castle, so its importance was self-evident. Although the mechanism was opened and closed from the inside, it was not impossible to open it with brute force. Leaving the jade lizard here could prevent enemies from sneaking in. As for Fergus Castle, with the 3 blood fiends there, even if a berserker were to attack, they would be able to deal with it and ensure its safety. After returning to the castle, Gray took a bath and changed his clothes. He felt much more comfortable. Although he could bathe in the Red Leaves Forest, that was when there was a stream or a lake. If he did not encounter one, he could only endure it. Young Master Gray. Hello, young Master Gray. As he walked into the castle, he was immediately greeted by the respectful greetings of the servants. Gray nodded slightly in response and then walked towards the white stone training field. At this time, Sarah should be practicing in the afternoon. Sure enough, when he arrived at the white stone training field, he saw Sarah cultivating there. She was wearing a blue battle suit, and her expression was serious and focused. She looked rather cute. Besides her, Caroline and Elise were also there. The former was wearing a purple battle suit, and her hair was tied into a ponytail. She looked valiant and formidable, while the latter was wearing a white battle suit. Gray sat in the pavilion and asked the servants to bring in pastries and freshly squeezed fruit juice. After waiting for a while, Sarah ran over. "Brother, you're back." Sarah happily hugged Gray's arm and shouted sweetly as she ran in front of Gray. Yes. Gregor smiled as he looked at the other party. Not bad. You're almost done with the first training posture of the second round. She had only started practicing for 4 months, and she was almost done with the first training posture. This cultivation progress was rather fast. Hee, of course, I'm a genius. The girl raised her sharp chin and said proudly. Then, he rolled his eyes and looked straight at Gray as he asked, Brother, did you bring me a gift? Gray could not help but stutter. He had originally planned to catch a blood fiend for Sarah as a battle beast. Unfortunately, although he had encountered many blood fiends, he had not encountered a newborn blood fiend. He could not help but smile. Of course. What is it? Sarah could not help but be happy. It's a secret for now. Gray's face revealed a mysterious smile, but in his heart, he wondered if this girl would blame him when she found out about the gift he had prepared for her. In the Red Leaves Forest, he did not get anything else, but he did get a lot of blood fiend's blood. In the future, Sarah would have to consume blood fiend's blood every day. What gift? Do we have a share? Caroline and Elise walked over. Caroline was smiling and joking, while Elise looked at Gray with fear. Gray's strength had already made her unable to have any thoughts of going against Gray. Of course, everyone will have a share. As for what it is, you will know tomorrow. Gray smiled and asked curiously, Why don't I see Brother Bernal? He went to visit the Iveline clan. Caroline had a playful look on her face. Gray's face revealed a look of understanding. The Iveline clan was the clan that Bernal was engaged to. Now that the two clans were engaged, it was indeed time for them to interact more. Pa. At this moment, a series of hurried footsteps were heard. Gray and the others turned around and saw the person they were talking to just now running over. The person came to Gray and said anxiously, Gray, you have to help me this time. Brother Bernal, what's going on? Didn't you go to the Iveline clan? Gray asked curiously. The person who came was Bernal, who was supposed to be at the Iveline clan. Something happened. I just came back from the Iveline clan. Bernal panted and said, Gray, you have to help me this time. Tell me what's going on first. Gray raised his eyebrows and didn't agree immediately. Although he had a good relationship with Bernal, he had to see what the matter was before making a decision. A few days ago, an iron mine was discovered at the border of the Iveline clan's territory. However, another clan nearby also had their eyes on this iron mine. I want to ask for your help to seize this iron mine. Bernal said quickly. You don't want me to secretly? Gray's brows furrowed slightly. Although he had secretly wiped out 2 clans, these 2 clans had grudges with him. One of them tried to assassinate him, and the other almost killed Fergus and the others, including himself. That was why he took action. Asking him to kill a clan that had no relation to him was a common thing in noble clans, but he didn't want to do it. No. Bernal shook his head quickly. Although Gray didn't say it out loud, he could guess the specific meaning. After all, he was one of the insiders of those 2 matters. In order to seize the mining rights of the iron mine, the Evelyn's clan negotiated with that clan to decide the ownership through a battle between the younger generation. I want you to represent the Evelyn's clan to participate. But I'm not a member of the Evelyn's clan. Besides, they can easily find out my identity. Gray frowned. It wasn't that he was arrogant, but he was considered a celebrity in the Sydney Marquee. You can ask for external help. Of course, it must be a relative. The relationship between our clan and the Evelyn's clan also count. Gray, you? Speaking of this, Bernal looked at Gray expectantly. No problem. Since it was like this, Gray naturally wouldn't refuse. After all, it was a simple matter. He had to give face to Bernal. Thank you, Bernal said gratefully. Chapter 190. The next morning, the carriage left Fergus Castle and headed towards the Evelyn's family. Other than Bernal and Gray, Sarah and Caroline were also in the carriage. Caroline wanted to borrow books from the Evelyn's family. Sarah heard that Gray was going to represent the Evelyn's family in the battle and immediately requested to go with him. Elise didn't go. She probably knew that Gray didn't have a good impression of her, so she would try her best to avoid wherever Gray appeared. In the afternoon, the carriage stopped at the Evelyn's family. "Gray, sorry to trouble you this time." In the living room, Baron Evelyn's Derek Evelyn's, a middle-aged man with brown hair, thanked Gray. As someone who was favored by Viscount Fergus and had a chance to be enfeoffed by the Marquis family, Baron Evelyn's had the strength of a ferocious blood warrior. However, in front of Gray, he didn't dare to be arrogant. According to the rumors, Gray was only an upper-level blood warrior and was one level lower than him. However, with Gray's potential, he would definitely surpass him. "Uncle Derek, you're too polite. The Fergus family and the Evelyn's family are already connected by marriage. We're already a family. If the Evelyn's family needs help, it's only right for me to help," Gray said politely. "Yeah, Uncle Derek, you're too polite," Bernal added. Right now, a young woman with brown hair was sitting next to him. She was wearing a white lace dress. She had a pretty face and a tall figure. She was his fiancée, Bernice Evelyn's. "Haha, okay, I won't be polite with you. I'll remember your gratitude in my heart." Baron Evelyn's had a smile on his face. He was even more satisfied with the marriage with the Fergus family. Originally, his ideal marriage partner was the heir of a noble family, but with the Fergus family's situation, Bernal had no chance of inheriting the title. However, in the end, he still agreed to the Fergus family's marriage. The reason was the potential that the Fergus family had shown because of Gray. With Gray around, the Fergus family was likely to become a count's family in the future. Even if Bernal wasn't the heir to the title, his status wouldn't be low in the future. Most importantly, if the Fergus family became an earl, the Evelyn's family's path to becoming a viscount would be much smoother. "By the way, I wonder who my opponent is this time?" Gray asked. Since he was going to represent the Evelyn's family, he naturally needed to understand his opponent. This was especially so for a battle between blood warriors. Blood warriors who practiced different blood spells had completely different strength. Logically speaking, with his current strength, no matter what kind of blood spell his opponent practiced, they shouldn't be his opponent. However, in order to not be arrogant, he still decided to understand his opponent's information. This time, the one fighting with the Evelyn's family for the iron mine is the McIntyre family. With the family situation, the most likely person to fight is Geoffrey McIntyre, a middle-level blood warrior. A man in his early 20s, slightly younger than Bernal, answered. He was Noah Evelyn's, the next heir of the Evelyn's family. Middle-level blood warrior? Gray didn't ask any more questions. Although it was good to be cautious, it was also necessary to have an appropriate amount of confidence. If he didn't even have the confidence to deal with a middle-level blood warrior, then he might as well find a piece of tofu and kill himself. 2 days later, in an empty space near the iron mine, two families that were preparing to fight for the ownership of the iron mine met. They really managed to invite him. In the direction of the McIntyre family, Baron McIntyre looked at Gray, who appeared in the Evelyn's family's team, and couldn't help but snort coldly. A trace of a cold smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "Dennis, the opponent is Gray Fergus. I'll have to trouble you this time." He naturally knew about the relationship between the Evelyn's family and the Fergus family. Even so, he still agreed to the battle because he was already prepared. "Uncle Doug, don't worry." A man with a high nose nodded. He looked in the direction of Gray. There wasn't a trace of fear in his expression. Instead, he was eager to fight. "It's Dennis Corney. Damn it, why is he here?" After seeing the man with a high nose who appeared in the McIntyre family's team, Baron Evelyn's expression became very ugly. He walked in front of Baron McIntyre with a gloomy expression. "Baron McIntyre, are you trying to tell me that Dennis Corney will represent the McIntyre family in the battle?" "I'm indeed going to let Dennis participate in the battle. What? You're allowed to invite Grey Fergus, but I'm not allowed to invite Dennis? Baron McIntyre sneered. Don't forget that there's a rule in the battle. The person invited must be related to the family. Baron Evelyn said coldly. Of course I know this. Unfortunately, the McIntyre family and the Corney family are already in-laws. Baron McIntyre smiled proudly and looked at the man with a high nose, Dennis Corney. The latter understood and stepped forward. Grey Fergus, I've always wanted to compete with a genius like you. Finally, I have the chance. Please. Dennis Corney extended his hand and gestured to Grey. The man with a high nose, Dennis Corney, walked towards the grass field not far away. Dennis Corney? Grey's face showed a trace of surprise. In the past few months, he had attended many banquets with Viscount Fergus, so he had some understanding of the noble families in the Sydney Marquis territory. Dennis Corney, the leader of this generation of the Baron Corney family. He was 28 years old and had the strength of an upper-level blood warrior. He didn't expect the McIntyre family to become in-laws with this family in order to fight against the Evelyns family. Although he was a little surprised, it was just a more powerful opponent. He didn't care and walked straight over. His opponent is actually Dennis Corney. Will Grey? Noah Evelyns showed a worried expression. Bernice also showed a worried expression. Although they were both upper-level blood warriors, Dennis Corney obviously became an upper-level blood warrior earlier than Grey, and he should have more combat experience. They couldn't help but worry. After all, an iron mine was a huge source of income for a baron like the Evelyns family. My brother won't lose. Hearing Noah Evelyns' doubtful words, Sarah raised her eyebrows and said with slight dissatisfaction. She knew that Grey was now a murderous blood warrior. How could he lose to an upper-level blood warrior? Don't worry, Grey won't lose. Bernal showed a reassuring smile to Bernice and assured her. The Fergus family didn't intend to reveal that Grey was a murderous blood warrior, so he could only comfort her like this. While they were talking, Grey and Dennis Corney were already fighting not far away. Clang! Dennis Corney unsheathed the weapon at his waist. It was a long and narrow sword with a green color. If he wasn't mistaken, it should be a magic weapon. Fighting for the iron mine was a battle of great benefits, so it was necessary to prepare the best weapon. In fact, the Evelyns family had asked Grey if he needed help preparing a magic weapon. Although they didn't have a suitable one, they could borrow one for Grey, but Grey refused. Whoosh! Holding the green magic weapon, Dennis Corney rushed toward Grey and slashed down with his sword. Under the green sword light, the surrounding weeds were blown toward Grey as if they were hit by a gust of wind. Swish! The green sword light slashed where Grey was, but it didn't cut anything except the weeds. Before that, Grey had already stepped out and left the place. Whoosh! Grey appeared beside Dennis Corney, and the blue and white magic sword turned into a flash of lightning and slashed toward him. But at this moment, Dennis Corney suddenly turned his head and looked in this direction. He turned around and met the attack with his sword. Dennis Corney naturally knew that the Fergus family's blood magic was good at speed, so he was already on guard when Grey dodged the attack and appeared beside him. Clang! Dennis Corney blocked the attack, but before he could take the opportunity to counterattack, he found that Grey had already disappeared and reappeared on the other side. Clang, clang, clang. Grey's sword continued to slash from all directions. Dennis Corney's initial calmness slowly turned into a difficult situation. Facing Grey's surprise attacks from all directions, although Dennis Corney blocked them, he couldn't help but be affected. The effect was very small and could be adjusted with a little time, but Grey's continuous attacks didn't give him any time to adjust. Instead, the effect accumulated. Boom! Finally, the effect accumulated to a certain extent, and Dennis Corney could no longer block Grey's sword. He was directly knocked back by Grey's sword, and his body lost its balance. Grey smirked and chased after his opponent, who was knocked back and lost his balance. This fighting style was the result of his training in the Red Leaf Forest. He had comprehended it while fighting with the Windchaser leopard. Poochie. Seeing Gray chasing after him like a gust of wind, Dennis Corney gritted his teeth. He suddenly stabbed the sword in his hand into the ground, and then poured the power of blood into the sword. The long sword emitted a green light, and the surrounding weeds suddenly seemed to come alive. They grew one after another and attacked Gray. You can't use the attributes of a magic weapon. Gray's smile widened, and the magic sword in his hand was suddenly surrounded by lightning. Crackle! Terrifying lightning exploded, and the weeds that rushed toward Gray turned black and withered in an instant. Not good! Dennis Corney's expression changed drastically. He wanted to pull out his weapon and retreat, but cold sweat suddenly appeared on his forehead. Chapter 191. I admit defeat. Feeling the danger at his neck, the man with a high nose, Dennis Corney, said with an ugly expression. He had 10 more years of combat experience than Gray, but he still lost. This made him feel like his face was burning. At the same time, he was full of doubts. How could his opponent have such rich combat experience? When he used the magic weapon at the end, why was the power released by his opponent so much stronger than his? Could it be that his magic weapon was of a higher grade? Gray looked at his opponent with a faint smile and put away his magic sword. It was natural that he had rich combat experience. After all, he was using blood fiends as practice targets. Fighting with blood fiends was a true battle of life and death. In such a battle, how could his combat experience not grow quickly? As for the fact that his magic weapon was stronger than his opponent's, it was even simpler. He was now a ferocious blood warrior. The power released from his magic weapon would naturally be at the ferocious blood warrior level. Naturally, it would be stronger than his opponent's. If his opponent did not release his magic weapon, Gray could still maintain the image of a high-ranking blood warrior and continue to fight with him for a while. Once he used his magic weapon, he would lose immediately. Trash! Looking at Dennis Corney, who admitted defeat with Gray's sword at his neck, Baron Macken's face was ashen. He had already cursed Dennis Corney countless times in his heart. Hearing his opponent's confidence, he agreed to the marriage with the Corney family, but he did not expect it to end in a crushing defeat. He had already made up his mind to dissolve the marriage when he returned. As for the reason, wasn't it enough that the Macken family lost an iron mine? Baron Macken, you let me win. In contrast to the ashen Baron Macken, Baron Iveline was full of smiles. Pride was almost written all over his face. In fact, right before the battle ended, he was still worried that Gray would lose. Who would have thought that this genius descendant of the Fergus family would give him such a pleasant surprise? He had actually defeated Dennis Corney, who was also a high-level blood warrior and should have had even more combat experience. Humph! Baron Mackintosh snorted coldly and led the Mackintosh family away. As for Dennis Corney, he didn't even bother to greet him. Since he had already decided to dissolve the marriage between the two families, it was inevitable that the relationship between the two families would turn sour. He didn't bother to hide it. Gray, thank you so much this time. Baron Iveline led his people to greet Gray with a smile. Uncle Derek, you're welcome, Greg said with a smile. For the victory, the Evelyn's family held a grand banquet. The main character of the banquet was self-evident. After staying in the Evelyn's family for one day, Gray's group bid farewell and left. Bernal wanted to stay for a few more days, but he also knew that Gray was not willing to stay here for long. After reaching the ferocious blood warrior level, there would be a commotion when cultivating blood arts. Gray hadn't been cultivating blood arts for the past few days. Delaying his cultivation for a few days, because of him, was already giving him a lot of face. After returning to Fergus Castle, Sarah and the others, who left on the second day after Gray's return, finally got to enjoy the belated gift from Gray, a cup of healthy blood fiend's blood every day. Bernal and Elise were both full of enjoyment. Being able to consume blood fiend's blood every day to aid their cultivation and feel their strength increasing rapidly, They couldn't be happier. On the other hand, Sarah and Caroline were full of resentment. Girls would always be disgusted by such things. For a few days, Gray could feel their resentful gazes. A few days later, right after Gray finished his cultivation and took a bath, a male servant walked towards him. "Young Master Gray. What's the matter?" Gray nodded and said indifferently, "Lord Viscount wants you to go to the study." "Oh." Gray nodded and walked towards Viscount Fergus's study. Dong dong dong. After knocking on the door, Gray pushed the door open and entered. "Have a seat." Viscount Fergus was sitting in front of the tea table. When he saw Gray push open the door and enter, he waved his hand and gestured to Gray. He couldn't see through this son of his more and more. If he were to say that he was already a berserker, he wouldn't be too surprised. During this trip to the Red Leaf Forest, his son actually brought back a large amount of Bloodfiend's blood. Not only did he bring back Bloodfiend's blood, he even brought back 4 types of Berserker Bloodfiend's blood. Thanks to him, he was now drinking Bloodfiend's blood every day. Although the blood of a murderous level Bloodfiend was useless to him, the blood of a Berserker level Bloodfiend was still useful to him. Even if it wasn't the blood of a Gale Wolf, it was still the same. It was just that the effect wasn't as good as the blood of a Gale Wolf. He felt that his strength, which was originally stagnant, was faintly loosening. Perhaps becoming a berserker wasn't impossible. Gray asked as he walked over and sat down. "Father, is something the matter?" "Yes." Viscount Fergus nodded his head. "Ever since you took back the barbarian level blood technique of the Windwolf Echelon and found out that the blood essence you'll need in the future is the blood essence of a Gale Wolf, I've been inquiring about the Gale Wolf's blood essence." At this point, a smile appeared on Viscount Fergus's face. "Just today, I received news that in half a month's time, there will be an auction in Tout City. The Gale Wolf's blood essence will be auctioned." "That's great." Hearing this news, Gray's face couldn't help but reveal a happy expression. Although it had only been a few months since he became a berserker, with his terrifying speed of improvement, he should be able to become a berserker in at most half a year's time. After becoming a berserker, he would have to implant a barbarian-level bloodline. Otherwise, his strength would stagnate. Based on his estimation, consuming the blood of a barbarian-level blood fiend would allow him to implant a barbarian-level blood fiend's bloodline and continue to improve his strength. But obviously, consuming the Gale Wolf's blood essence and implanting a Gale Wolf bloodline was the best choice. After all, with the corresponding blood technique, he wouldn't have to rely solely on the second metamorphosis to increase his strength even faster. "I hope that you will personally make a trip to bid for it," Viscount Fergus said solemnly. As a desolate level blood fiend, the Gale Wolf's final bid would probably be around 1,000,000 gold coins. Needless to say, it was extremely valuable. After thinking about it, he felt that it was best for Gray to personally go. "Yes, father." Naturally, Gray had no reason to disagree. Or rather, if Viscount Fergus had asked someone else to go, he might have suggested to Viscount Fox that he go himself. After all, this was related to the improvement of his strength in the future. He had to be careful. "Oh right, you've hunted quite a number of blood fiends this time. Have you figured out the limits of that magic weapon's ability?" This question had been lingering in his heart for a long time. Ever since he found out that Gray had brought back the blood of a berserker-level blood fiend, this question had been constantly lingering in his heart. In the end, he decided to ask. "I've already figured it out." Gray nodded. Although he didn't have a magic weapon, there was no need to hide the number of blood fiends from Viscount Fergus. "How is it?" Viscount Fergus asked expectantly. "If the target is a murderous level blood fiend, I can control a total of 20 of them." 20? Viscount Fergus's eyes lit up, and a look of pleasant surprise bloomed on his face. 20 murderous level blood fiends. Even if they couldn't use their blood fiend abilities, it was still enough to kill a berserker level blood fiend. It was no wonder that Gray had brought back the blood of a berserker-level blood fiend. If the target is a berserker-level blood fiend, I can control a maximum of 4 of them. Gray continued. You can control berserker-level blood fiends? And you can control 4 of them? Upon hearing this, Viscount Fergus, who was already pleasantly surprised, couldn't hide the shock on his face. Regardless of whether it was the blood fiend's ability or the magic weapon, they all had their own limit. However, he didn't expect that the magic weapon Gray had obtained would have such a high limit. Not only could it control murderous-level blood fiends, but it could also control berserker-level blood fiends. Moreover, he could control 4 of them at once. 4 berserker-level blood fiends that couldn't use their blood fiend abilities. With this combat power, an ordinary berserker would be able to contend against 2 people. One could only imagine how powerful this magic weapon was. Good, very good. After a while, Viscount Fergus regained his composure. His eyes were filled with anticipation for the future of the Fergus family. Things like cultivation talent might be good in one generation, but it might not be good in the next generation. If this generation couldn't do it, it might not be the same in the next generation. Although there were some genetic factors, it couldn't be controlled. However, magic weapons were different. Chapter 192. A young man dressed as a servant was driving a carriage at high speed on the road. Gray was sitting in the carriage. Tout City was the largest city in Marquis Stuart's territory. It was quite far from Viscount Fergus's territory. Therefore, Gray immediately set off after receiving the news. Viscount Fergus had given him a total of 1,000,000 gold coins for this trip. Fortunately, the Fergus family had made a fortune from the red leaf forest. Otherwise, they might not have been able to fork out such a huge sum of money. Apart from that, Gray also took out 500,000 gold coins from his private vault in case of any accident. He was determined to get the Gale Wolf's blood essence this time. After all, if he missed this opportunity, he didn't know when he would get another one. With the speed at which his strength was increasing, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to wait until then. Gray looked at the other side of the carriage. There, a 3-meter-long leopard-type blood fiend was quietly curled up. It was one of the 4 berserk-level blood fiends. It's a pity that the other 3 blood fiends are too big to bring along. On the way to Tout City, they would have to pass through many densely populated areas. Apart from the leopard-type blood fiend, the other 3 blood fiends were each bigger than the other. It was really inconvenient to bring them along, so he only brought the leopard-type blood fiend with him. I hope there won't be too much trouble. He had brought a lot of money with him this time. What he was going to do would cause quite a commotion. In addition, he was an outsider and could easily attract covetous eyes. Fortunately, with his and the leopard-type blood fiend's strength, it wouldn't be a problem to take on 3 to 5 berserk warriors. Even if he encountered berserk warriors, he could use the leopard-type blood fiend as a temporary mount and rely on its speed to escape. I wonder if I can buy the blood of other blood fiends apart from the Gale Wolf's blood essence. The reason why he took out 500,000 gold coins from his private vault was to prevent the Gale Wolf's blood essence from being insufficient. On the other hand, he wanted to see if he could find the blood of other blood fiends. If he could find blood that could greatly increase his strength after consuming it, he would naturally buy it without hesitation. Although he had already decided on the type of blood he would consume next time, he would never complain about having too much blood that could greatly increase his strength. 10 days later, the carriage was only half a day away from Tout City. Along the way, they encountered several waves of bandits, but they were all easily annihilated by him. He had no sympathy for the robbers. He knew that most of these people were civilians who were dissatisfied with the current situation of being oppressed by the nobles. However, if he was dissatisfied with the current situation, he could become a mercenary. Robbing others of their belongings and killing the innocent should not be done. Guru Guru. As the carriage moved forward, a group of about 10 people appeared in front of the carriage. There was a carriage in the middle, surrounded by dozens of guards on horseback. Some of the guards were wearing battle armor. It was obvious that the person in the carriage was not an ordinary person. However, they seemed to have encountered some trouble and stopped on the road. "Young master, the road ahead is blocked." The servant outside the carriage, who was in charge of driving the horses, said to Gray. "Let's go around the grass." Gray opened the curtains and took a look. There was a grassland beside the road that could be bypassed, so he ordered the servant. "Yes, young master." The footman answered, and pulling at the reins, urged the horse into the meadow beside the road, and prepared to go round it. However, at this moment, a young girl in a light yellow dress walked out from the group and called out to Gray's carriage. "Please wait a moment." Hearing the call, the servant stopped the carriage. Gray raised his eyebrows and opened the curtains to look in the direction of the voice. There was a very beautiful girl there, especially her pair of light purple eyes, which were exceptionally eye-catching. "May I ask what is the matter?" Gray asked, nodding to the other party. "Hello, our carriage has broken down. Can we take a ride in your carriage?" The young girl in the light yellow dress asked. "I'm sorry, but the carriage is full." Gray politely refused without any hesitation. If it were any other time, he wouldn't mind giving her a ride. It wasn't because she was beautiful, but because it wasn't easy to go out. Back then, when he went out alone, Sophia took care of him and saved him the trouble of squeezing into a carriage with a group of people. If he had the ability, he wouldn't mind helping this young girl in the yellow dress. Unfortunately, there was a leopard blood fiend curled up in his carriage. Not only did it take up a lot of space, but he couldn't show it to anyone. After all, his ability to control corpses was his trump card, and he couldn't let a stranger know about it. "We're about to reach Tourette City. Can we squeeze in a little?" The young girl in the yellow dress frowned imperceptibly, and then a sweet smile appeared on her face. The nearest city was Tourette City. Even if their destination wasn't Tourette City, they would still pass by it. That was why the young girl in the yellow dress stopped Gray's carriage. "Sorry." Gray shook his head. It wasn't a matter of squeezing. Of course, he couldn't tell her this. Why are you like this?" Seeing that Gray still refused, the smile on the young girl's face disappeared. She put her hands on her hips, and her chest heaved up and down. Her beautiful purple eyes glared at Gray angrily. "All right, didn't the others already say that the carriage is full?" A young girl in a white dress walked over. Her appearance was somewhat similar to the young girl in the yellow dress. Compared to the young girl in the yellow dress, her breasts were towering, and one could clearly see her curves. She was just like a mature young girl. "But, sister," the young girl in the yellow dress frowned and wanted to refute. "We're not far from Tourette City. Let's change into our battle armor and ride over." The girl in the white dress said, "All right." Seeing that the girl in the white dress had made up her mind, the young girl in the yellow dress could only nod in agreement. "Sorry to disturb you, it's fine now." After persuading the young girl in the yellow dress, the girl in the white dress bowed slightly to Gray and said. The other party's refined and courteous attitude caused Gray to feel a little embarrassed. However, it was true that he could not allow these two people to enter the carriage. Gray could only say that. "Sorry." He nodded to the girl in the white dress and let down the curtains, indicating for the servants to continue on their way. On the way, the group of people they met just now overtook them on horseback and headed towards Tourette City. In the afternoon, a huge and majestic city appeared in front of Gray's eyes. This was a huge city that wasn't any smaller than Sydney City. It was as majestic as a mountain, standing tall on a plain. Because nobles weren't allowed here, the carriages obediently lined up and paid the fee to enter the city. The city was bustling with people moving about, and it was obvious that there were quite a lot of people in the city. After searching for a while, Gray found a decent tavern not far from the auction house and booked a room with a training room. After washing up, Gray left the room and went down to the restaurant on the first floor. He found an empty table to eat. Sister, look, it's that guy. In a corner of the restaurant, the young girl in the yellow dress pointed in Gray's direction and said in surprise. The girl in the white dress also looked at Gray in surprise. She didn't expect to meet him again in a tavern, and it seemed that they were both staying here. Damn it, that guy said it was full. Look, he's the only one here. Seeing Gray sitting down to eat alone, the girl in the yellow dress was so angry that her teeth itched. The girl in the white dress also raised an eyebrow, but she didn't look as bitter as the girl in the yellow dress. After all, the carriage belonged to the other party, and it was his freedom to let them sit in it. However, she looked down on Gray in her heart, and thought that such a person wasn't worth befriending. Humph, the girl in the yellow dress rolled her eyes, and she couldn't help but think of ways to teach Gray a lesson. Forget it, the carriage belongs to someone else. It's his freedom to let us sit in it. Seeing that the girl in the yellow dress wanted to teach Gray a lesson, the girl in the white dress hurriedly stopped her. After a long while, the girl in the yellow dress finally calmed down. When the two girls noticed Gray, Gray also noticed them. He naturally guessed that they had seen through his lies. This luck, isn't it a little too bad? Gray felt a little awkward. Tout City was so big, and he thought that they wouldn't meet again. He didn't expect to meet them again. Chapter 193. Soon after, Gray discovered that he lived next door to these two girls. Every time he returned from sightseeing, he would run into them. The girl in yellow snorted coldly every time they met, clearly holding a grudge against him. Although the girl in white did not do the same, she looked at him with a cold gaze, clearly categorizing him as someone who was not easy to befriend. After the initial awkwardness, Gray no longer cared about the two's attitude. After all, he had his reasons for rejecting them. Besides, he had no plans to further his relationship with them. A few days later, the auction was about to begin. Gray rode a carriage to the auction house. Nobles who were not from the Marquis of Tolt naturally did not enjoy special treatment. Gray sat in the ordinary seats on the first floor, waiting for the auction to begin. About half an hour later, an old man walked up to the auction stage. Thank you all for attending this auction. The auction will now officially begin. The old man coughed lightly, then announced the start of the auction. Today's first item is the Blue Tears earring, crafted by Grandmaster Kong Good Jewelry over several years. The starting price is 100 gold coins, and each increment must be no less than 10 gold coins. The bidding begins now. 150 gold coins. 200 gold coins. 250 gold coins. In the end, the item was bought by a noblewoman for 1,300 gold coins. The second item is a runic fan crafted by Runemaster Jonah. It can produce cool winds while rotating. The starting price is 200 gold coins, and each increment must be no less than 10 gold coins. The bidding begins now. 250 gold coins. 300 gold coins. 400 gold coins. In the end, the runic fan was bought for 2,000 gold coins. The third item, the fourth item. Gray listened to the bidding in silence, but did not participate in the auction. The auction held in Tourette City was clearly of a higher level than the Ford Auction House's auction that he had attended before. If the auction held by the Ford Auction House was considered a low-end auction, then this one was a high-end auction. Gray wasn't surprised. Since the blood essence of a desolate level Gale Wolf would appear in an auction, the level of this auction couldn't be low. Moreover, Gray reckoned that there were quite a few nobles like him on the first floor of the auction house who came from other territories, as well as the descendants of nobles. This was because even though the final price was easily over 1,000 gold coins, there were still a lot of people bidding on the first floor. The 15th lot, the 21st item, the 26th item, the 30th item. On the auction stage, there was a bronze vase that was more than 10 centimeters tall on a tray. The old auctioneer spoke. 10 sets of Blood Beast Frost Tiger Blood. The starting price is 1,000 gold coins. Each increment must be no less than 100 gold coins. The bidding starts now. Frost Tiger. Forget it, his ability can only be considered average. Gray gave it some thought and ultimately gave up on bidding for the Frost Tiger blood. The Frost Tiger was a berserk-level blood beast in the Hanhu sequence. In terms of ability, it was an upgraded version of Hanhu. If there wasn't any Jade Lizard blood, he wouldn't mind buying it. This way, when his strength reached the berserk level, his blood beast ability would have a stronger ice characteristic. As for the ice characteristic of Hanhu in his body, it had already been developed to the limit. After all, Hanhu was only a murderous level blood beast. If he didn't consume the blood of a higher level Frost Tiger, even if his strength reached the berserk level, his ice characteristic wouldn't be enhanced. However, after obtaining the Jade Lizard, he wasn't interested in it. The power of the Frost Tiger's ice ability was only average among berserk-level blood beasts. Even if he wanted to enhance the ice characteristic of his blood beast after reaching the berserk level, he would have to look for blood beasts with extremely powerful ice abilities. 1,200 gold coins. 1,500 gold coins. 2,000 gold coins. Gray gave up, but many people participated in the auction. Generally speaking, the higher the level of the blood beast, the greater the increase in strength after consuming it. Even if the blood method wasn't of the Hanhu sequence, as long as the ability of the blood method was inclined towards ice, there would be a good increase in strength. As for why these people didn't buy or bid for blood beasts of the same sequence as themselves, it wasn't that they didn't want to, but that it was difficult to encounter one. For example, Gray entered the Red Leaf Forest this time. He originally wanted to hunt gale wolves and use their blood to aid his cultivation, but he didn't encounter any. The same was true for the hunting teams that entered the forest to hunt blood beasts. Under normal circumstances, it was completely up to luck to be able to hunt blood beasts. As for why the Fergus family was able to buy gale wolf blood and gale wolf blood essence from the Sydney family, it was because the Sydney family had a specialized hunting team that stored the blood after a long period of hunting. In the end, the blood of the Frost Tiger was bought for 5,300 gold coins. The auction continued. The 32nd lot, 10 portions of blood of the berserk-level blood beast Thorn Monkey. The 34th lot, 10 portions of blood of the berserk-level blood beast Whirlpool Turtle. The 36th lot, 10 portions of blood of the berserk-level blood beast Mantis. The 40th lot, 10 portions of blood of the berserk-level blood beast Bull. In the last auction, whenever Gray heard that the auction item was blood beast blood, he would listen carefully. However, he would give up after listening for a while. It wasn't that he didn't understand the types of blood beasts. For some of the rarer blood types, the auctioneer would explain the corresponding abilities of the blood beast. He would only judge after listening to the auctioneer. The 42nd lot. On the auction platform, a light blue metal wrist appeared in front of everyone. The wrist was covered in runes, exquisite and beautiful. This is a rune wrist made by Master Norris. It will automatically activate in the face of danger. After activation, it can withstand 100 attacks from a Berserk Warrior and 10 attacks from a Berserk Warrior. The starting price is 10,000 gold coins, and each increase must be no less than 1,000 gold coins. The auction begins now. 13,000 gold coins. 15,000 gold coins. 17,000 gold coins. After listening to the auctioneer's introduction, the bidding continued. Even Gray couldn't help but feel a fire in his heart. Although it could only withstand 10 attacks from a Berserk Warrior, it was the best way to save one's life at a critical moment. When facing a Berserk Warrior, not to mention 10 times, even 1 or 2 times would be good enough. Maybe because of this 1 or 2 times, reinforcements would arrive in time and save one's life. This was especially true for someone like Gray who could command a berserk blood beast stronger than him. 10 times of protection was enough for him to mobilize a berserk blood beast to come to his aid. I must get it. Thinking of this, Gray immediately called out a price. 40,000 gold coins. 45,000 gold coins. 47,000 gold coins. However, his bid was quickly drowned out by other bids. Obviously, everyone wanted a life-saving method. 100,000 gold coins. 103,000 gold coins. Fortunately, when the price exceeded 100,000, the bids became sparse. 105,000 gold coins. Gray bid without the slightest hesitation. The annual tax income of a Viscount family was only about 10,000 gold coins. 100,000 gold coins would take a Viscount family at least 20 years to accumulate. Obviously, this price was very expensive. However, things like money were not as valuable as life. In addition, this thing could be said to be extremely useful to him. No matter what, he had to get it. Now, he was glad that he brought an extra 500,000 gold coins. Otherwise, he would have missed this good thing. 110,000 gold coins. On the first floor of the auction house, a man gritted his teeth and bid 115,000 gold coins. Gray continued to bid 120,000 gold coins. The man gritted his teeth even harder 125,000 gold coins. Gray increased the price without hesitation. At this time, in the auction house, only Gray and that man were still bidding. It's that guy. In a VIP room on the second floor of the auction house, a girl in a yellow dress and a girl in a white dress were sitting inside. When only Gray and another man were bidding, the girl in the yellow dress immediately noticed Gray. I didn't expect this guy to be so rich. The girl in the yellow dress curled her lips. A bid of more than 100,000 gold coins, even with her family background, had to be taken seriously. However, seeing Gray's appearance and almost no hesitation, it was obvious that Gray's wealth was definitely far greater than this. She rolled her eyes and then looked at the girl in the white dress with a fawning expression. "Sister, this guy seems to be determined to get the arm. Should we?" She was still brooding over Gray's refusal to let them ride the carriage. "No." The girl in the white dress interrupted the girl in the yellow dress. She knew the girl in the yellow dress too well, so before the girl in the yellow dress finished speaking, she immediately understood that the girl in the yellow dress wanted to raise the price of the arm and make Gray suffer a hidden loss. Although she really didn't like Gray, she didn't want to do so, because once she did so, it was almost certain that she would become enemies with the other party. Although she wasn't afraid with her family background, she didn't want to add enemies for no reason. 140,000 gold coins. 150,000 gold coins. In the end, the arm was bought by Gray for 150,000 gold coins. The auction continued. 45th auction item. 47th auction item. Although the following auction items were also quite good, it wasn't to the point where Gray had to buy it at all costs. In addition, he didn't know how high the price of the Gale Wolf's blood essence would be, so he didn't participate in the auction. Finally, an exquisite small bronze bottle appeared on the auction stage. The auctioneer looked around and said with a smile. Chapter 194. 130,000, 160,000, 200,000, 400,000, 600,000. The auction began. Most of the bidders were from the private rooms on the second floor. There were only a few people on the first floor, including Gray. As the price rose, these people lost their voices one after another. In the end, only Gray was left. In this way, he was quite eye-catching. In an auction of this level, those who could sit in a private room on the second floor naturally had an extraordinary status. Gray, on the other hand, was only able to sit in an ordinary seat on the first floor. It was obvious that his status was not too high. Under such circumstances, it was hard not to attract attention if he had the ability to compete with the people in the private rooms on the second floor. Gray also knew this. He had expected this when he came. However, the blood essence of the Gale Wolf was something he needed. Even if it was too eye-catching, he had to buy it. 650,000. In the private room on the second floor, the voice of an old man was heard. 680,000. It was also from the private room on the second floor. This time, it was the voice of a middle-aged woman. 700,000. It was Gray's voice. 720,000. It was the voice of an old man. 760,000. It was the voice of a middle-aged woman. 800,000. Gray continued to raise the price. At this point, only Gray and the two people in the private rooms on the second floor were left. Gray's purpose was to use the blood essence for implantation. However, he did not know the purpose of these two people. Since Sophia was able to trade the blood essence of the Gale Wolf sequence, the Fergus family and the family behind Sophia should not be the only ones who had the blood essence of the Gale Wolf sequence. After all, if this thing really belonged to a family, that family would not trade it. In addition, the blood essence was the most essential part of the blood of a blood fiend. Although the most common use was to implant a bloodline, it was not without other uses. Therefore, Gray could not guess the purpose of these two people bidding for the Gale Wolf's blood essence. 820,000. It was the voice of a middle-aged woman. 860,000. It was the voice of an old man. 900,000. It was Gray's voice. 920,000. 940,000. The price was over 900,000. The old man's voice disappeared, and only Gray and the middle-aged woman remained. 1 million. The middle-aged woman's expression was unsightly. Originally, she had estimated that she would be able to buy it for 900,000 yuan, but now, it had exceeded 100,000 yuan. This made her very unhappy. 102 million. Gray continued to bid, but he was rejoicing in his heart. Fortunately, he had brought an extra 500,000. Otherwise, he would have missed out on the Gale Wolf's blood essence. 104 million. The middle-aged woman said with a cold expression. 106 million. Gray quoted a price. 108 million. The middle-aged woman's face was so gloomy that water could drip from it. A cold light flickered in her eyes. 1 million. Gray continued to bid. Following his bid, the middle-aged woman's voice fell silent. Even after the auctioneer confirmed that the bid was successful, the middle-aged woman's voice did not appear again. Gray breathed a sigh of relief. Although he still had about 1,400,000 gold coins left, he was still a little afraid that the final price would exceed this number. Fortunately, such a thing did not happen. How much money does this guy have? In a private room on the second floor, the yellow-dressed girl covered her mouth and stared at Gray in surprise. After bidding for the arm and wrist for 150,000 yuan, he also bid for the Gale Wolf's blood essence for 1 million yuan. These two items added up to more than 25 million yuan. Moreover, it should not be all that this guy had. Even if she had an extraordinary background, she could not help but be slightly surprised. The white-dressed girl did not speak, but her brows were knitted together. Since he was sitting on the first floor, it meant that Gray's status should not be too high. Suddenly revealing such a large amount of wealth would easily attract covetous eyes. In another private room on the second floor, the middle-aged woman who gave up the bid had a cold look in her eyes. She ordered a middle-aged man beside her. "Go and investigate this person." "Yes, madam." The middle-aged man respectfully replied and left. Not only the middle-aged woman, but many people did the same thing at the same time. If it were the people in the private rooms on the second floor, many of them would not have such thoughts. After all, to be able to sit in a private room on the second floor in this kind of auction, one's status was naturally not ordinary. However, since it was the people in the private rooms on the first floor, they could not help but have thoughts. As the auctioneer, the old man who was the auctioneer was obviously very happy that the Gale Wolf's blood essence could be auctioned at a high price of 1 million yuan. He smiled and said, "Now, let's start the auction of the 50th item. This is also the last item of this auction." He removed the black cloth covering the tray, and a dagger that had been pulled out from its sheath appeared in front of them. The dagger was white, but there were mysterious green patterns on the surface. It looked extremely strange and mysterious. This item came from a ruin. After the auction house's appraisal, it is confirmed to be a bronze-grade magical weapon. At this point, his voice paused slightly. Its attribute is that it can turn the target it killed into a spirit and imprison it in the dagger to fight for you. What? Did I hear wrongly? The auctioneer said that this dagger can turn the target it killed into a spirit? Things like spirits really exist? The auctioneer's words caused a commotion in the auction hall. The sound of chatter was endless. What were spirits? Everyone present knew. Some of them were legends passed down by word of mouth, and some of them were read in books about the supernatural. Although they had heard of them or seen them in books, not many people would believe them. Most people generally regarded them as a kind of fictional existence. However, at this moment, the auctioneer in front of them actually said that the target it killed would be turned into a spirit. Did that mean that spirits really existed? Bronze grade? It can turn the target it killed into a spirit? Gray, who did not care about the auction at the end and only wanted to wait for the auction to end to retrieve the item, had a look of surprise in his eyes. He was not surprised by the existence of spirit. After all, he had seen spirits before. Instead, he was surprised by the grade of this dagger and the ability of this dagger. Magic weapons had different grades, and he only knew about it recently. The reason was because Viscount Fergus suspected that the magic weapon that could control corpses was a bronze-grade weapon. That was why he had popularized it to him. According to Viscount Fergus, the lowest grade of magic weapon was dark iron grade. Gray's magic sword and Viscount Fergus's own magic sword were of this grade. Above that was bronze grade. Weapons of this grade were very rare. Every one of them was extremely valuable. It would be easy to sell them for millions. Moreover, there was no market for them. Above that, there seemed to be even higher grade weapons. However, with Viscount Fergus's identity, he could not come into contact with them. He did not know what kind of weapons they were or what they were called. The reason he knew about bronze-grade magic weapons was because the current Marquis of the Sidney family had a bronze-grade magic weapon. He did not expect that the dagger in front of him was a genuine bronze-grade weapon. Moreover, it was probably not ordinary among bronze-grade weapons. After all, the dagger's ability was to create spirits. He had experienced how difficult it was to deal with spirit. If he did not have the means to restrain spirits, it would be useless no matter how strong he was. One could imagine the high value of this weapon. Not to mention others, even he could not help but be envious. Unfortunately, he could only be envious. He, who had bid for the Gale Wolf blood essence, definitely did not have the ability to bid for this dagger. Ahem, everyone, please be quiet. The old man, who was the auctioneer, coughed twice to draw the attention of the crowd to himself. I know that everyone has doubts about the existence of spirits and the ability of this weapon. Therefore, this auction will prove it on the spot. Speaking until here, he clapped his hands. Suddenly, a tiger that was tied to a handcart was pushed out, violently struggling. The old man picked up the dagger and stabbed it into the tiger's heart. As blood spurted out, the tiger's struggles slowly weakened and finally disappeared. Using a white towel to wipe the dagger clean, the old man held the dagger horizontally. Whoosh! A misty white light shone from the dagger. Finally, under everyone's astonished gazes, the light transformed into the image of a tiger. A cold wind blew, causing the temperature of the auction hall's front desk to drop by a few degrees. A few people sitting in the front row could not help but shrink back. Except for a few people who already knew about it, everyone looked at the fierce tiger in front of them in astonishment. The common sense they had formed all this time was shattered. Spirits really existed. This dagger could actually create spirits. 250,000, 300,000. 350,000. Amidst the shock of the people on the first floor and the intense bidding on the second floor, this bronze-grade magic weapon was finally auctioned off for 2,200,000. If Gray did not hear wrongly, the final winner of this bronze-grade magic weapon should be that pair of sisters. His previous guess was not wrong. The other party had indeed come for the auction. Moreover, their identity was not ordinary. After all, they were able to sit in a private room on the second floor. Chapter 195. The next morning, Gray checked out of his room and left the city as soon as the city gates opened. Throwing out 25 million gold coins in one go might have attracted some people's attention. He wanted to leave as soon as the auction ended, but the city gates were closed and he couldn't do that. A few hours later, he was already quite far away from Tute City. However, the robbery that he was expecting did not happen. However, Gray didn't relax because of this. He knew that your performance at the auction house last night would definitely attract covetous eyes. Rustle, 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 roar. The horse pulling the carriage was startled. It raised its two front legs and stopped in a hurry. Gray pulled open the curtains and looked outside. He saw a masked man standing in front of the carriage. He could only tell from his attire and Adam's apple that he was a man. The masked man grinned and rushed towards the carriage. Whoosh! Gray hurriedly jumped down from the carriage and pounced on the man. The magic sword in his hand was surrounded by lightning as he stabbed at the man. Seeing Gray's speed, the man's expression changed. A battle axe appeared in his hand, surrounded by green light, and blocked the sword. He was one of the people who had targeted Gray at the auction. A young man with more than 1,000,000 gold coins without any guards was like a walking wallet. That was why he followed Gray as soon as he left the city. However, it seemed that this young man was not simple. Judging from his speed, he must be a ferocious warrior who specialized in speed. He finally felt that this huge sum of money was not so easy to get. Clang! The side of the battle axe blocked the sword. The lightning did not enter the man's body. The battle axe in his hand was also a magic weapon. Its specialty was to increase the weapon's sharpness. Pack! Pack! The man couldn't help but take a few steps back. His expression darkened. The force from the battle axe was stronger than expected. He thought that the young man specialized in speed, but now it seemed that the young man was not only fast, but also strong. This young man was very strong. He regretted making a move. Wealth could move people's hearts, but how could a person with so much wealth not have some skills? This was a very simple logic. If one calmed down and thought about it, any normal person would be able to think of it. It was just that the huge wealth had blinded his eyes, causing him to lose this kind of judgment. At the same time, it was not without a kind of wishful thinking. Gray did not know what the man was thinking. Even if he knew what the man was thinking, he would not give up. Since the man dared to rob him, he had to be prepared to pay with his life. Clang, clang, clang. Holding the demonic power sword, which was surrounded by lightning, Gray attacked one after another. Puff! After several attacks, the axe in the man's hand was deflected away. Gray's sword pierced straight into the man's chest. In the process, although the man used his blood fiend ability and unleashed several stone spikes to attack Gray, they were easily dodged by Gray. Patter! The sword was pulled out, and blood flowed from the corner of the man's mouth. His eyes were filled with unwillingness as he fell. If he could go back on his words, he would definitely run as far away as possible. Unfortunately, there were no ifs. After picking up the man's axe and wallet, Gray returned to the carriage as if he had just done something very ordinary. He let the servant driving the carriage continue on his way. With his current strength, he could defeat two ordinary ferocious blood warriors even if they joined forces. Naturally, it would not be too easy for him to deal with one person. He did not even use his blood fiend ability. The reason why he was so calm was because many murderous grade combatants had died in his hands. Not counting the murderous blood beasts, he had already killed 9 ferocious blood warriors. If he counted the murderous blood beasts, it would be more than 20. Another few hours passed, and it was already afternoon. Gray did not encounter any more assassination attempts. He did not know if it was because he had killed the man with lightning speed, which intimidated the others. He remained vigilant. Suddenly, his expression changed. Without hesitation, he rushed out of the carriage and saw masked figures darting out from the forest on both sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. A total of 4 figures darted out and blocked the carriage's path. All 4 of them were masked. One of them was the person who had followed the middle-aged woman's orders to investigate Gray in the private room last night. After investigating and finding out that Gray only had 1 master and 1 servant, the middle-aged woman ordered him and 3 other companions to attack Gray. Originally, he wanted to let the other covetous people take the lead and observe Gray's strength. However, after Gray killed a ferocious blood warrior without using his blood fiend ability, many people had secretly retreated. Even those who did not retreat merely watched in secret. Seeing that no one was willing to help them test Gray's strength, he finally decided to make a move. 4 people. Gray frowned slightly. Although he had not seen the 4 of them make a move, he knew that they were not weak from the speed at which they had dashed out from the forest. They were most likely ferocious blood warriors. He tightened his grip on the sword in his hand. In the carriage, the leopard blood fiend, which had been curled up, raised its head. He believed that he could handle 2 ferocious blood warriors. As for 4, he could only let the leopard blood fiend take action. Clop, clop, clop. Just as the battle was about to break out, an unexpected scene occurred. Following the sound of many hooves, a group of dozens of people rapidly approached from behind. Seeing the confrontation in front of them, the group of dozens of people could not help but be startled and quickly stop. This group was the group that the 2 women were in. The 2 of them had come for the auction. After the auction ended, they would naturally return along the same path. Apparently, they had taken the same route as Gray, which was why they had encountered each other. "It's that fellow's carriage." Lifting the curtain and seeing the carriage in front, the yellow-dressed girl immediately recognized that it was Gray's carriage. She was too resentful and had a deep impression of Gray's carriage. "Heh, this is bad." Knowing that the one who was in trouble was Gray, the yellow-dressed girl could not help but gloat. She had always wanted to teach Gray a lesson, but due to her sister's obstruction, she had never had the chance. Now that she saw Gray in trouble, the depression that had accumulated in her heart for the past few days was finally swept away, leaving behind a gloating expression. The white-dressed girl also looked at the 2 parties in front of her and raised her eyebrows. Seeing her sister's reaction, the yellow-dressed girl could not help but say anxiously, "Sister, you're not thinking of helping that fellow, are you? Besides, we're also in trouble now." Given her resentment towards Gray, it was already good enough that she did not add insult to injury when Gray was in trouble, let alone help him. No. The white-dressed girl shook her head. If the previous incident had not happened, she might have helped the other party. But now, she definitely would not. Moreover, just as her sister had said, their current situation was not good either because they had also encountered a wave of assassination. Although they had an extraordinary status, they were still unable to withstand the desperation of those who wanted to take risk. There was no lack of daring people in this world. Besides, as long as they did it cleanly, there was no guarantee that they would be found out later. "It's them." While keeping his guard up against the 4 people, Gray looked back and saw that it was the team of the 2 girls. He could not help but raise his eyebrows. His relationship with the 2 girls could not be said to be good. Would these 2 fellows take advantage of the situation to rob him? After thinking about it, he decided to strike quickly and end the battle as soon as possible. He could not give the 2 girls any chance to take advantage of the situation. Ha! He cast out an icy wind blade and quickly slashed in the direction of the 4 people. Without waiting to see the result, He quickly pounced on the four people and unsheathed the demonic sword in his hand. At the same time, the leopard blood fiend also rushed out from the carriage. Swish! Faced with the wind blade that was slashing at them, the four people dodged to the side. Just when the four people thought that they had dodged, they were surprised to find that a gust of cold air had spread out. Even though they were close to the wind blade, there were actually specks of frost on their bodies. It's cold air. The four people's expressions changed. Although they had rich combat experience, they did not expect the wind blade to be mixed with cold air. Immediately, they were at a disadvantage. Whoosh! Gray had already rushed to the front and slashed at the person who bore the brunt of the attack. Although the person's body was slightly frozen, he still managed to block the sword with his saber horizontally. The other three immediately prepared to surround Gray from both sides and attack him from all sides. At this moment, Poochie! The sound of flesh being slashed rang out. Claw marks appeared on the throat of one of the men who had surrounded Gray from the side. Blood spurted out, but in the end there was no more sound. With his eyes wide open, he fell to the ground weakly with a thud. What? The sudden scene caused the other two people who were about to surround Gray to turn pale. They looked up and saw that one of their companions had died. A leopard blood fiend appeared at the place where their companion died, and was now pouncing on the two of them. The two of them did not have the time to surround Gray. With panicked expressions, they slashed at the leopard blood fiend. Whoosh! The leopard blood fiend gently twisted its body and dodged the two people's attack. It circled to the side of one of them and clawed at him. Immediately, blood flowed out from the man's chest and he was sent flying. Then, it pounced on the other person and also clawed at him, injuring him. Back then, it took a total of 15 blood fiends and a mad level blood fiend to finally surround and kill this leopard blood fiend. Now, there were only 2 ferocious blood warriors. How could they be a match for the leopard blood fiend? After the 2 people got up, they hurriedly used their blood fiend abilities to stop the leopard blood fiend from approaching. However, the leopard blood fiend easily dodged their attacks. After a few claw attacks, their stomachs were cut open and their intestines spilled out. On the other side, Gray was facing a ferocious blood warrior, the man who was in the same private room as the middle-aged woman. Due to the cold air, the man's body was slightly stiff. After a dozen moves, Gray killed him as well. Chapter 196. That fellow is so strong? The yellow-dressed girl's gloating expression froze on her face. She even rubbed her eyes. After a while, she finally uttered this sentence. Born in a great aristocratic family, she was naturally knowledgeable. From the exchange of blows, she could naturally determine that the 4 people fighting with the other party were all ferocious blood warriors. However, these 4 ferocious blood warriors were actually killed by the other party and a leopard in a short period of time. One could imagine how strong the other party was. So strong. The white-dressed girl's eyes were also filled with shock. The leopard-type blood fiend was definitely strong. After all, the 3 ferocious blood warriors only lasted for a short while before being killed by the leopard-type blood fiend. In her opinion, Gray was also extremely strong. Facing a ferocious blood warrior, he was actually able to kill them in just a dozen exchanges. Even she, who cultivated a special blood technique, might not be able to do so. She finally understood why the other party was so confident in carrying such a large amount of wealth. She also understood why the other party had rejected her request to ride in the carriage. Obviously, the other party had rejected them because there was a leopard-type blood fiend hidden in the carriage. Could that be a berserk wind leopard? The yellow-dressed girl stared blankly at the leopard-type blood fiend that had easily killed the 3 ferocious blood warriors. It can't be wrong. A man in yellow battle armor with many wrinkles on his face appeared beside the carriage on horseback. His expression was solemn as he spoke. Uncle Craig, are you confident in facing that Windrider leopard? Sensing the man's solemn expression, the white-dressed girl was shocked and could not help but ask. I won't lose, but it will be difficult to win. The man in yellow battle armor, Craig, said seriously. The white-dressed girl and the yellow-dressed girl looked at each other and could see the intense shock in each other's eyes. The man in yellow battle armor, Craig, was sent by their father to protect their safety. He was a genuine berserk blood warrior and had rich combat experience. He had even been on the battlefield before. However, such a person actually said something like, "I won't lose, but it will be difficult to win." One could imagine the strength of this wind leopard. At this moment, both of them were incomparably glad. Although they complained that the other party was unreasonable, they did not punish him in the end. Otherwise, they would have really made a great enemy. With their family's strength, they were not afraid. However, this was not their family's territory, and they only had this much strength. "Miss, I suggest we cooperate with them." The man in yellow battle armor, Craig, after pondering for a moment, said seriously. "Cooperate?" The white-dressed girl raised her eyebrows as she pondered the possibility. She naturally understood why the man in yellow battle armor, Craig, said. Now that the other party had been ambushed, and so had they. Moreover, both parties were quite strong. If they could work together, it would indeed be easier for them to get through this crisis. She and ferocious blood fiends blood warriors, and ferocious blood warriors, Craig, ferocious blood warriors, Craig, ferocious. Blood ferocious bloods, right ferocious. He was a little surprised by the leopard-type blood fiend's battle prowess. Facing 3 ferocious blood warriors, the leopard-type blood fiend's battle prowess had exceeded his expectations. However, he quickly thought of the reason. Since the violent leopard-type blood fiend did not have the ability of a blood beast, or rather, its ability as a blood beast was based on its physical strength, the leopard-type blood fiend was the only one among the 4 mad-level blood fiends under his control whose strength was not reduced. Since it was a berserk blood fiend with full combat strength, it was not strange for it to have such a performance. What are they trying to do? However, at this moment, he saw the white-dressed girl and a man in yellow battle armor walking over. He raised his eyebrows and signaled the servant to carry the confiscated weapons into the carriage while he waited for the other party to arrive. The strength displayed by ferocious blood fiend gave him a lot of confidence. In addition, he still had his arms. He wanted to see what the other party wanted to do. Cooperate? Gray looked at the white-dressed girl in surprise. He had thought of various reasons, but he did not expect her to come here to seek cooperation. However, he did not reject her immediately. The white-dressed girl's suggestion did make him feel a little strange. Ferocious Blood Fiend had auctioned off a bronze-level magic weapon, so she should be targeted as well. Both parties were in the same situation. If they cooperated, it would be beneficial for both parties. Of course, this depended on the other party's strength. If the other party's strength was a burden to him, he would not agree. Therefore, he asked, "I need to know your approximate strength before I can make a decision." The woman in the white dress was not surprised by Gray's answer. They had also seen how powerful Gray was, which was why they had the idea of cooperating with him. 1 Berserk Blood Warrior and 4 Berserk Blood Warriors. At this point, she looked at the man in yellow battle armor beside her. The man in yellow battle armor understood. He stretched out one hand and a ferocious beast's claw appeared on the surface of his palm. This was undoubtedly a shape-shifting ability that could only be used after reaching the berserk stage. I agree. Seeing this, Gray no longer hesitated and nodded in agreement. There was no reason to reject a win-win situation. The carriage set off again, but this time, Gray's carriage joined the 2 girls' team. The 2 girls came from the Cumberland Marquee, which happened to be next to the Sydney Marquee. If the route was adjusted, they could travel together for 7 to 8 days. The 2 parties cooperated and moved forward. 2 days later, in the evening, both parties set up their tents. "Be careful." Suddenly, Gray's expression changed, and he shouted a warning. The moment he spoke, a voice rang out. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More than 10 people suddenly rushed out from the forest beside them, full of murderous intent. Although his infrared perception could detect targets hiding in the forest, because it was through thermal radiation, the distance was quite short. It was only 20 to 30 meters away. Beyond this distance, he could not detect them. Whoosh! 8 of them directly used their blood fiend ability. Tornadoes, orange-yellow fireballs, water arrows, all of them shot towards Gray and the others. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! More than 10 water arrows attacked Gray. Gray quickly dodged and avoided several of them. Then, his 2 arms were like 2 shields in front of him, blocking 2 water arrows that could not be dodged in time. After resolving his crisis, Gray looked at the dozen or so people who were rushing over with a dignified expression. Among the dozen people, 8 of them could use their blood fiend ability, which meant that there were at least 8 ferocious blood warriors. Moreover, there were so many ferocious blood warriors in the team, so how could there not be any berserk warriors? Whoosh! At this time, the 2 girls' team had already met the dozen people, including the girl in the white dress. After thinking for a while, Gray summoned his leopard blood fiend and rushed over. With the strength of the 2 girls' team and his own strength, they should be able to put up a fight against the dozen people. If they really could not defeat them, it would not be too late to let the leopard blood fiend carry him and escape. Clang, clang, clang. The 2 sides soon began to fight. One of the dozen people took the initiative to meet the man in the yellow battlesuit. After exchanging blows, he did not fall into a disadvantageous position. There was no doubt that he was a ferocious blood warrior. Facing Gray and the leopard blood fiend, who were rushing toward them among the dozen people, one of them immediately went to meet the leopard blood fiend, while 2 others went to meet Gray. The person who went to meet the leopard blood fiend was actually able to react quickly when the leopard blood fiend attacked from the side. He reversed the direction of his blade and forced the leopard blood fiend to retreat. Surprisingly, he was also a ferocious blood warrior. 2 ferocious blood warriors. Seeing this scene, Gray's pupils shrank. Facing the powerful combination of him and the 2 girls' team, they still dared to attack. Sure enough, they were confident. There were actually 2 ferocious blood warriors. To be able to bring out 2 ferocious blood warriors, what kind of force was targeting them? Or was it an alliance of many forces? In fact, Gray's guess was close to the truth. This attacking team was made up of several forces. After Gray and the 2 girls bought items worth more than 1,000,000 yuan at a high price, these forces followed them. However, the strength of the 2 parties exceeded their expectations. In the end, they did not expect that the 2 parties would actually join forces. Chapter 197. Crackle, crackle. Facing the 2 who took the initiative to attack him, Gray's demonic sword was entwined with lightning. He quickly slashed at the leader of the 2. The sword was wrapped in blue and white lightning, looking like a thunderbolt falling from the sky. Boom! The weapons collided. The leader of the 2 was directly knocked back by the force of the collision. Gray immediately prepared to chase after this person. However, at this moment, swish! A flash of sword light quickly attacked him from the side. The biting cold sword wind was like the cold wind of winter, causing his hair to stand on end. Clang! Gray quickly turned around and swept out his sword. With a loud sound, this person was also knocked back by Gray. Just as this person was forced back by Gray, the first person had recovered and attacked Gray again. 2 ferocious blood warriors. There was no doubt that the 2 people attacking Gray were ferocious blood warriors. 2 of you. Demonic power entwined around the lightning sword. Gray's face showed a trace of graveness, as well as a trace of eagerness. Whoosh whoosh. The 2 people rushed at Gray. Ha! With a low roar, Gray slashed out with his frost wind blade. The azure wind blade carried biting cold air as it attacked the 2 people. Dodge! The 2 people had obviously already known from the intelligence that Gray's frost wind blade contained fierce cold air. One of them dodged to the side as if avoiding a snake or a scorpion, avoiding the frost wind blade from a distance. It was also because of this that the distance between the two people was extremely wide. Whoosh! Seizing the opportunity, Gray suddenly rushed at one of the two people. The demonic sword in his hand was powerful and heavy as he slashed at this person again and again. Clang, clang, clang. This person was continuously knocked back by Gray. His hands became increasingly numb, and it became increasingly difficult for him to resist. Pooh! Finally, he couldn't resist anymore and was slashed in the stomach by Gray. Blood flowed out. Seeing that his companion was injured, the other person knew that things weren't good. He used his blood fiend ability and an orange fireball suddenly attacked Gray. Whoosh! The orange-yellow fireball carried a terrifyingly high temperature. It was like a meteor falling from the sky, quickly smashing towards Gray. The injured man heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that his companion had used his blood beast ability to rescue him. But in the next moment, his expression changed drastically. Whoosh! Faced with the incoming fireball, the other party did not dodge. Instead, he continued to stab his sword straight at his heart. Puff! The sword stabbed into his heart. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with fear and confusion. Why did the other party want to kill him even at the risk of being seriously injured or even dying? Boom! Just as Gray's sword pierced the injured man's heart, the fireball smashed onto Gray's body. There were no surprises. Bang! Gray was sent flying, and the injured man who had his heart pierced was sent flying by the aftermath of the explosion. He was completely dead before he even hit the ground. Is that so? Seeing that Gray was willing to be hit by the fireball to kill his companion, the man who used the fireball had a strange expression on his face. He only had a moment of silence in his heart for his companion to encounter such a crazy opponent. Then, he looked in the direction where Gray was sent flying and rushed over. He and the injured man were just temporarily put together. They did not have any friendship. If he died, he would die. There would be one less person to share the loot with. What? But when he saw that Gray was sent flying by the explosion, the expression on his face suddenly became horrified. He hurriedly stopped his forward movement. Unlike what he had imagined, Gray's body did not show any signs of injury even after being attacked by his blood fiend ability. The only damaged part was the clothes on Gray's left arm. It was completely burned and his entire arm was exposed. Other than that, there was no other injury. Whoosh! After moving his left arm that blocked the fireball and confirming that it was not injured, Gray revealed a sinister smile. He fiercely stomped on the ground and quickly rushed toward the man who used the fireball just now. Facts proved once again that the iron arm of the steel-armed ape was an indestructible shield. Even the blood beast ability of the ferocious blood warrior could not damage it. Not good. The man who used the fireball changed his expression. He hurriedly used another fireball to intercept Gray and quickly retreated. Two people were not a match for each other, not to mention one person. He needed backup. Boom! Boom! 2 consecutive fireballs were launched, but Gray dodged them. The distance between him and Gray did not widen. Instead, it got closer. Damn it! Looking at the approaching Gray, the man who used the fireball clenched his teeth and quickly slashed at Gray with his sword. Swish! Facing the sword of the man who used the fireball, Gray did not dodge. He stretched out his left hand to block, but his right hand held the sword and slashed at the man's throat. Clang! Poochie! The sword of the man who used the fireball slashed at Gray's hand. Gray's hand was unharmed, but Gray's sword easily slashed the man's throat. Thud! The man who used the fireball did not dare to open his eyes and fell powerlessly. After killing the 2 men, Gray looked at the leopard blood fiend. The leopard blood fiend was still fighting with the ferocious blood warrior. From time to time, the leopard blood fiend would attack the ferocious blood warrior from all directions. The ferocious blood warrior looked dignified and vigilant. The ferocious blood warrior was already injured. The leopard blood fiend had the upper hand, but the ferocious blood warrior was, after all, a ferocious blood warrior. Looking at the situation, the leopard blood fiend would not be able to defeat the ferocious blood warrior in a short time. After thinking for a while, Gray did not rush to meet up with the leopard blood fiend. Even with the ferocious blood warrior, they might not be able to defeat the ferocious blood warrior quickly. Instead, he looked in another direction. The two women's teams were engaged in an intense battle with the other robbers, but the situation was not good. Although the number of robbers was much smaller, they were all extremely powerful. The number of ferocious blood warriors was even greater, and more than 10 guards had already been killed. The woman in the white dress was besieged by 2 ferocious blood warriors and appeared to be in a rather sorry state. However, her opponent must have cultivated a special blood technique, which made her stronger than ordinary ferocious blood warriors. Even though she was besieged by 2 ferocious blood warriors, she was only at a disadvantage. Swish! Gray directly pounced on one of the ferocious blood warriors who was besieging the woman in the white dress. Suddenly, the ferocious blood warrior felt a strong wind coming from the side. His expression changed, and the war saber in his hand instinctively swept in this direction. Clang! With a loud sound, the ferocious blood warrior retreated continuously and saw the person who attacked him. It was one of the people that they needed to pay special attention to during their previous discussion. For this reason, they even sent out 2 ferocious blood warriors to besiege the other party. But what was going on now? Where were the other 2 people? Without giving the ferocious blood warrior a chance to think further, Gray's sword had already pierced straight at him. Clang, clang, clang. In the face of Gray's powerful attacks that came from all directions, the ferocious blood warrior was no exception. Once again, he followed in the footsteps of his 2 companions and was stabbed to death by Gray's sword. After killing the ferocious blood warrior, Gray immediately pounced in another direction. Meanwhile, the woman in the white dress also killed her opponent after a few exchanges. After killing her opponent, she gazed deeply in Gray's direction before rushing in another direction. If she was not wrong, the other party was also besieged by 2 ferocious blood warriors. She was also at a disadvantage when facing 2 ferocious blood warriors, but the other party was able to counterattack and kill the 2 ferocious blood warriors. The difference in strength between the 2 of them was obvious. She was increasingly unable to understand this person. He did not seem to have any status, but everything he had displayed was extremely shocking. Whether it was his method of controlling the corpses of blood fiends or his counterattack of killing 2 ferocious blood warriors, these were not things that an ordinary descendant of a noble clan could do. Retreat! These 10-odd people came from different factions. Seeing that several of their own had been killed, someone finally turned and fled. Following this person's escape, more and more people followed suit and fled. In the end, the 2 ferocious blood warriors, who were the main force, could only helplessly retreat with their subordinates. After repelling this group of bandits, Gray's group had no intention of pursuing them. Although they had killed a few of the bandits, they had lost even more people on their side. They did not have the spare energy to pursue the bandit. After collecting the corpses and burying them on the spot, the 2 groups continued on their way. Big sister, that guy is very strong. In the carriage of the 2 sisters, the yellow-dressed girl had a trace of fear on her face. She had been ordered to hide in the carriage and had not participated in the previous battle. However, she had been secretly sizing up the battle outside and had seen the entire process of Gray fighting 2 ferocious blood warriors alone before finally killing them. She had originally believed that her big sister's strength would not be inferior to the other parties, but now it seemed that her big sister was still somewhat lacking. Tell me the process of how he defeated those 2 ferocious blood warriors, the woman in white said after some thought. She was truly very curious as to how exactly the other party had defeated those 2 ferocious blood warriors. As the yellow-dressed girl recounted, the woman in white's expression grew more and more grave. She was even more astonished when she heard that Gray had blocked the ferocious blood warrior's blood fiend ability completely unscathed. She could be considered to be very knowledgeable, but she had never heard of such a blood technique. The blood fiend ability had the characteristics of wind blades and cold air. Its strength and speed were also extremely high, and its defense was so strong that it could block the attack of a ferocious blood warrior's blood fiend ability without suffering any damage. This person gave her a mysterious feeling, an extremely mysterious feeling. In the following days, Gray's group did not encounter any more attacks. Even when they parted ways with the two girls and returned to Fergus Castle, they were still not killed. Chapter 198. After returning to the Fergus family, Leyland spent his days cultivating and relaxing. In the blink of an eye, several months had passed since Gray had successfully bought the Gale Wolf's blood essence. In these few months, apart from attending the occasional banquet, Gray spent most of his time in the castle. The second metamorphosis of his body, and the cultivation of the blood technique, had allowed his strength to improve rapidly. Viscount Fergus might not be able to catch up to him even if he trained for a year. He had already entered the fourth posture of the second blood technique. As long as he completed the fourth posture, he would be able to reach the level of a berserker. If he didn't stay too long at the critical point between a ferocious warrior and a berserker, he estimated that he would be able to reach the level of a berserker in 3 months at most. This was the realm that Viscount Fergus had always wanted to reach. After several months, he estimated that he should be able to consume the blood of a blood fiend again. He lay in the bathtub and soaked his body in hot water. He took out the bronze bottle that contained the jade lizard's blood and drank a mouthful of it as usual. Boom! As if he had swallowed a bomb, a violent reaction appeared in Gray's stomach and spread throughout. He was truly worried that his stomach would explode because of this. Fortunately, this didn't happen. The scorching heat spread throughout his body, causing his skin to turn crimson. A numb feeling washed over his body again and again, causing his senses to slowly become sluggish. Half an hour later, when he regained consciousness, the heat and numbness in his body had disappeared. All that was left was fatigue. After resting for a day, Gray felt that his body had completely recovered the next day. Only then did he begin to test the changes in his body. After thinking for a while, he directly went through the underground tunnel and headed to the forest. He wanted to see how the jade lizard was doing. After a few months, he was truly worried that the jade lizard had rotted. During the hunt, the jade lizard's injuries were the most serious. After all, the jade lizard was too difficult to deal with, and he didn't have the ability to hold back. It's all right. After passing through the door mechanism and arriving at the forest, Gray heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the jade lizard. The ability to control corpses and keep corpses alive was still effective on the jade lizard. The jade lizard's body did not rot, but there were many injuries. It looked shocking. Looking at these injuries, Gray couldn't help but recall the time when he and the Redwing had surrounded and killed the jade lizard in the Red Leaf Forest. It had taken a total of 4 berserk blood fiends, 1 berserker, and several ferocious blood warriors to finally kill it. At the thought of the jade lizard's strength, he could not help but look forward to the changes in his body. I hope it won't disappoint me. With that in mind, Gray began the test. Although it was called a test, it was actually just a test to move his body as much as possible. He wanted to feel his body's condition and compare it with before he consumed the jade lizard's blood. Through running, he could feel the change in his running speed. By hammering the rock with his fist, he could feel the changes in his strength. By controlling the jade lizard's strength to attack him, he could feel the changes in his body's strength. It was extremely rough, but there was no other way. The Fergus family didn't have any rune items that could specifically test one's physical fitness. It was said that the Sidney family had one, but Gray obviously couldn't go to the Sidney family to borrow it. If that was the case, wouldn't he be completely exposing his background? No changes. After a series of tests, Gray confirmed that his strength, speed, and defense had not improved. Or perhaps the improvement was so small that he couldn't feel it. His current strength, speed, and defense came from the Hanhu, Wind Wolf, and Shadow Snake Blood Fiend. He had the advantages of 3 Blood Fiends in one body. In any aspect, he was already at the top level among Blood Fiends of the same level. If he wanted to improve, he would probably have to consume the blood of a Blood Fiend that was at the top of the same level. Although the Jade Lizard's strength, speed, and defense were equally strong, this was only secondary. It was called a Special Blood Fiend because of its Blood Fiend ability. Its attacks were powerful, and it had the extremely heaven-defying ability of reverse nurturing. Thinking of this, he looked at the surrounding plants and tried to use the ability to control plants. Swish, swish, swish. A large number of plants in the surroundings suddenly came to life. Even though there was no wind, some of them grew vines, and some of the branches became sharp, entangle. The thought of entangling the Jade Lizard appeared in his mind. Immediately, vines twisted like snakes and entangled the Jade Lizard. In the blink of an eye, Bayushi was completely entangled. The entire Jade Lizard was wrapped up like a dumpling. Let's test its strength. He ordered the Jade Lizard to break free from the binding of the vines. Crack, crack, bang! After a violent struggle, the vines that were entangled around the Jade Lizard were all broken free. After all, the Jade Lizard was a berserk blood fiend. It was normal for it to be able to break free from Gray's plant control ability, since he was only a vicious blood warrior. However, watching the Jade Lizard break free, Gray could clearly feel that it wasn't easy for it to break free. It is indeed a very strong plant control ability. Seeing this, Gray couldn't help but nod. Because he was only a vicious blood warrior, his plant control ability couldn't be compared to when he fought with the Jade Lizard. However, it was already extremely powerful among the murderous blood fiend. Based on his estimation, if they were entangled by these vines, very few murderous level blood fiends would be able to break free. Next is the most important ability. Gray took out a dagger and looked at his invulnerable arm. He had no choice but to pull up his trousers and cut his leg with the dagger. He felt a wave of pain and traces of blood appeared. In order to test the ability to reverse nurture blood fiends, he had gone all out and harmed himself. However, he had no choice. He couldn't possibly wait until he was about to die to test this ability. If he suddenly discovered that the ability to reverse nurture was useless when he was about to die, he would be in big trouble. Buzz! An invisible wave spread out with Gray as the center. The surrounding trees suddenly emitted bits of green light, and then quickly gathered in his direction. Swish! In the blink of an eye, the small injury on Gray's leg had recovered. Suddenly, Gray cried out in surprise. The small injury on his leg had already healed, but the green light that was converging did not stop because of this. Instead, it continued to converge on him. And the direction of gathering was the Jade Lizard, which was standing not far away from him. What is going on? Gray widened his eyes in shock and stared blankly at the Jade Lizard, which was enveloped by the green light. The wounds on the Jade Lizard's body that were originally covered in green light were rapidly healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. When the green light disappeared, what appeared in front of him was a completely uninjured Jade Lizard. It's alive? No, that's not right. Gray took a few big steps back reflexively. Facing a Jade Lizard that was alive was a disaster. It could kill him in minutes. He heaved a sigh of relief when he was sure that he could still control the Jade Lizard. Since he could still control it, it wouldn't go berserk. His safety wasn't a problem. He slowly walked in front of the Jade Lizard and carefully examined it. He hadn't seen wrongly. The Jade Lizard didn't have a single injury on its body. Its jade-colored scales were as crisp as jade. Other than its slightly dazed eyes, it didn't seem any different from a real Jade Lizard. He reached out and touched its body. It was cold to the touch, but he heaved a sigh of relief. Since its body was cold, it meant that the Jade Lizard hadn't come back to life. It was just that its injuries had mysteriously healed. Is it because the jade lizard can use the ability to reverse nurture blood fiends? Or is it because I used the ability to reverse nurture and healed its injuries? Gray was puzzled. Long ago, he had already discovered that the ability of blood fiends that he obtained from swallowing blood wouldn't be absorbed completely. Instead, it would be adjusted according to his own condition. After swallowing the blood of Hanhu's blood fiends, he didn't obtain the ability to spit out cold air. Instead, cold air was mixed into the wind blades of the wind wolves, giving the wind blades both the sharpness of wind blades and the freezing ability of cold air. Chapter 199. Gray's eyes lit up. If it was as he had guessed, it would be great news. The corpses of the controlled blood fiends were full of wounds, and some of their bones were even broken. As a result, their defense and combat strength were more or less weaker than when they were alive. For this reason, Gray would try his best to avoid leaving behind injuries that would affect their combat strength when hunting blood fiends. However, blood fiends were powerful and knew how to resist. They would not just stand there and let you stab them in the heart, leaving only a hole in their body. Therefore, it was inevitable that in terms of combat strength and defense, they were weaker than when they were alive. If the reverse nurturing ability could really be used on these blood fiends and heal their injuries, it would obviously be able to preserve their combat strength and defense. Moreover, since there would be battles, there would definitely be injuries. If the reverse nurturing ability could heal injuries, wouldn't that mean that as long as the blood fiends were not completely damaged, they could continue to be used? Is that so? Let's do it again. Gray's eyes lit up. After he gave the order, the other 3 blood fiends that were originally in the basement walked out of the tunnel one by one and finally arrived at the forest. With the 3 blood fiends, Gray left the area that was full of withered trees and found a lush green area. He tried to use the reverse nurturing ability in his mind. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Once again, spots of green light floated out from the surrounding trees. These green lights were like clear spring water that flowed downward. They converged and finally wrapped around the 3 blood fiends. Under his gaze, the wounds on the 3 blood fiends healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. When the green lights disappeared, the wounds on the 3 blood fiends had disappeared without a trace. Like the jade lizard, they had returned to their previous appearances. Apart from their slightly lifeless eyes, they were no different from living blood fiends. With such blood fiends, no one would doubt that they were battle beasts. They can really be healed. Gray was pleasantly surprised. The result was very obvious. Due to the transformation ability, the reverse nurturing ability had undergone some kind of mutation. Not only could it heal itself, but it could also heal the blood fiends that were under his control. I won't have to worry so much when I fight in the future. In the past, as the battle progressed, the blood fiends would sustain more and more injuries, resulting in irreversible damage. When Gray used the blood fiends to fight, he would always be extremely careful. This made him feel like he was tiptoeing around, unable to move freely. But now, he didn't have so many misgivings. There was no need to worry about being unable to fight due to injuries. Obviously, there would be a lot less apprehension in battle. There was no doubt that the mutation of the reverse nurturing ability was extremely useful to him. I just don't know to what extent the recovery ability of reverse nurturing can reach. Gray immediately thought of another problem. Since it was a recovery ability, it must have its own limit. Can a severed limb be repaired? If his head was chopped off or damaged, could it be repaired? I can give it a try. The 4 blood fiends were all mad-level blood fiends and were his precious fighting force. Naturally, he couldn't use them for such an experiment. However, this wasn't a problem for him. Although he couldn't use the 4 mad-level blood fiends, he could use other animals to try it. He only needed to temporarily remove the control over one of the mad-level blood fiends. After spending 2 days, Gray finally completed the experiment. It wasn't that he didn't want to do it in one go. After all, the reverse nurturing ability was a blood fiend ability and consumed a lot of blood force. The experiment showed that even if the limbs were chopped off, as long as they weren't severely damaged, the reverse nurturing ability could be used to repair them by putting them together. Even if the heads were chopped off, they could be repaired by putting them together. The only thing that couldn't be repaired was the damaged head. He didn't know if it was because the head was too delicate or for some other reason. Based on the results, he was extremely satisfied. Obviously, the benefits of consuming the jade lizard were huge. Just the reverse nurturing ability alone was enough for Gray to waste a chance to transform and consume this blood. Not to mention, the jade lizard's plant control ability was an extremely powerful blood fiend ability. Previously, the jade lizard was able to defeat 4 mad-level blood fiends, a ferocious blood warrior, and several ferocious blood warriors in a split second. Moreover, the jade lizard's strength, speed, and defense could be ranked among the top in the same realm. When he reached the level of a ferocious blood warrior, he didn't need to consume the blood of other blood fiends. His strength, speed, and defense were already extraordinary. Gray was in a good mood. He went to the horse farm outside the castle and rode the scarlet blood horse gifted to him by Viscount Fergus toward Fergus City. There was a good roast goose restaurant in Fergus City. After his last visit, Gray felt that the taste was pretty good and wanted to try it again. Thump, thump, thump. Behind him, there was a huge commotion. The scarlet blood horse shook its body in panic. Gray looked back and was speechless. A giant white tiger that was 2.5 meters long, not including its tail, was running towards him. There was a young girl on top of the giant tiger. It was Sarah. "Brother!" Sarah called out sweetly as she came in front of Gray. "Why did you ride Little White?" Gray tried his best to pacify the scarlet blood horse that was panicking after encountering the blood fiends. He looked at her speechlessly. "I'm here to buy candies. It's faster to ride Little White," Sarah said matter-of-factly. Gray rolled his eyes. This was the first time someone rode a beast to buy candies. He didn't know how much pressure the owner of the candy store would feel. Because of Gray, Sarah's status in the Fergus family had been raised again and again. Now, even Viscount Fergus would not punish Sarah as long as she didn't make a big mistake out of respect for Gray. This caused the girl to be extremely arrogant. He heard that a while ago this girl brought Han Hu to wander around the city. For some reason, they had a conflict with a noble young master and scared him to the point that he peed his pants. This was not a good sign. Gray purposely said with a serious face, "Don't do this again. If you think it's too slow, you can ride my scarlet blood horse." "I know." Sarah stuck out her tongue. Finally, Gray arrived at the roast goose shop. Under the eyes of the owner, who was about to cry, Gray enjoyed the delicious roast goose and brought Sarah back to Fergus Castle. Somewhere in the kingdom, the 4 core members of the Shadow Serpent were having a meeting. Since last year, the number of assassination missions the organization has received has decreased by a lot. Our income has decreased by 1/3. Do you have any suggestions to turn the situation around? On the main seat, an old man with cold eyes said with a gloomy face, "Sir, the reason for this is mainly because the assassination mission against the Sidney family failed last year. This caused the noble families to doubt the organization's assassination ability. I think that as long as we can wash away this shame, we will be able to increase the number of missions." The eye-patch woman said with a sharp look in her eyes. "Wash away the shame? You are preparing to make a move against the Sidney family again?" The old man with a cold face looked at the eye-patch woman. "Yes, sir." The eye-patch woman's eyes were filled with cold killing intent. In the end, the reason the organization suffered such heavy losses and was suspected of having the ability to assassinate was all because of the Fergus family. Now that half a year has passed, the Sidney family must have retreated. I am preparing to personally eliminate this family and restore the organization's reputation. I object. Hearing the eye-patch woman's words, the purple-haired man frowned and objected. Since the assassination of the Sydney family last year, the organization has suffered heavy losses. Continuing to assassinate the Sydney family is not beneficial to us. We should end all operations related to the Sydney family. I think so too, the short brown-haired man said. In order to assassinate the Sydney family, the organization has lost too much power. Although we have received some rewards because of the support of the Sydney family's enemy, it is obvious that the effort is not proportional to the benefits. On the main seat, the old man with a cold face held his chin with one hand. After a moment, he put down his hand and glanced at the three people. The reason why the Shadow Serpent is in such a decline is indeed because of the failed assassination against the Sydney family. Continuing to target the Sydney family is indeed not beneficial to the organization's development. However, the culprit who caused all this cannot be left alive. Even if it is for the sake of the Shadow Serpent's reputation, they must be erased. Speaking of this, he looked at the eye-patch woman. Chapter 200. At midnight, Gray and the others returned from the banquet hosted by Earl Ford's family. Ever since Twain Ford and his sister had personally delivered the invitation to the auction, the Fergus family and the Ford family had been interacting more frequently. Gray, come to the study. Gray, who had spent a lot of energy dealing with the overly enthusiastic noble ladies at the banquet, was about to return to his bedroom to sleep when he was stopped by Viscount Fergus. Gray was full of doubts as he followed Viscount Fergus to the study. He wasn't sure what Viscount Fergus wanted, and why did he pick this time? "Father, what's the matter?" Gray asked directly as he sat opposite Viscount Fergus at the coffee table. Viscount Fergus also knew that Gray was very tired at the moment, so he asked without much hesitation, "What do you think of Miss Hazel?" Gray was shocked by Viscount Fergus's question for no reason. After a while, he looked at Viscount Fergus with a strange expression. "Father, could it be that Earl Ford wants to betroth Miss Hazel to me?" Hazel was the young lady who had accompanied Twain Ford to deliver the invitation to the auction. Gray had occasionally seen her at banquets in recent months. No. Viscount Fergus shook his head. Gray heaved a sigh of relief for some reason, but the next moment, he was hammered again. "But I can sense that Earl Ford has this intention," Viscount Fergus continued. "If you can form a marriage alliance with the Ford family, it will be beneficial for both the Fergus family and the Ford family. Of course, this depends on your own wishes. The Fergus family doesn't need your marriage alliance to obtain benefit." It was only because of Gray that he could discuss it so nicely. If it were Bernal or Elise, he would have already made a decision. He had no choice. Gray's strength was not inferior to his, and he was the Fergus family's hope of becoming an earl's family in the future. If he were to be estranged from Gray because of a marriage alliance, the disadvantages would outweigh the advantages. "What do you think?" Gray pondered for a moment before replying. "I'm still too young. I don't want to consider such things too early." In terms of beauty, Hazel was indeed rather beautiful. However, not all beautiful people were suitable to be wives. Gray didn't want to make a hasty decision, and he indeed didn't want to consider such matters too early. "All right." Viscount Fergus nodded. Since Gray had already said so, he could only support him. While Gray and Viscount Fergus were talking in the study, 6 figures silently flipped over the walls of Fergus Castle and entered the Fergus Castle. They were shrouded in shadows as they moved forward in the shadows of the castle. The patrolling guards brushed past them 10 meters away, but they didn't discover the 6 of them at all. One of the 6 was a woman wearing an eye patch. She was one of the 3 captains of the Shadow Serpent who had the strength of a berserker. Relying on their shadow abilities, the 6 of them avoided several waves of patrolling guards and successfully entered the castle's hall. Then, they followed the stairs to the 2nd floor and groped their way to the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor was where the Fergus family's bedrooms were located. Soon, the person at the front entered the 2nd floor. He carefully looked at the 2 sides of the corridor on the 2nd floor. With his night vision, he didn't sense any signs of life. In order to prevent assassinations, some noble families would bring hunting dogs to the bedrooms at night. With their keen ears and sense of smell, they would discover assassins in advance. They had already expected such a situation and had made preparations. But now, it seemed that the Fergus family's vigilance was more lax than expected. They didn't do such a thing. He turned his head and stretched out his hand, gesturing for his companions to follow him. At this moment, in the corridor on the second floor, where he hadn't discovered any signs of life, a huge creature suddenly jumped out. With a strong gust of wind, it clawed at his back. Boom! A loud sound suddenly rang out, as if something had heavily smashed against the wall and caused it to collapse. Not good, something's happened. In the study, Grey and Viscount Fergus were shocked. They picked up the spare weapons in the study, opened the door, and ran in the direction of the sound. Because they had already experienced 2 assassinations, how could the Fergus family not be on guard? In the past, they would have placed a hunting dog in the corridor on the second floor. However, after a discussion between Grey and Viscount Fergus, they replaced the hunting dog with a leopard-type blood fiend, which had a sharper sense of smell and hearing. The leopard-type blood fiend, as the corpse of a controlled blood fiend, naturally couldn't sense body temperature. This was also the reason why the shadow serpent assassin didn't discover the leopard-type blood fiend hiding in the shadows. "It's an assassin, don't come out." When Grey and Viscount Fergus rushed to the staircase, they saw the leopard-type blood fiend being surrounded by 6 people dressed in black. There was a hole in the wall on the second floor, which seemed to have been created by someone. Without a doubt, they had encountered an assassin. He immediately shouted to stop everyone who was about to come out of the bedroom. How could the Fergus family have a berserk-level blood fiend? The eye-patched woman was bewildered at this moment. She almost thought that she had chosen the wrong target. Originally, she thought that with her team, it would be easy to destroy the Fergus family, which only had one ferocious blood warrior. Unexpectedly, before the assassination began, they were ambushed and one of them was injured. What surprised her even more was that the blood fiend that suddenly ambushed them was actually a berserk-level blood fiend. A family that only had ferocious blood warriors actually had a precious berserk-level blood fiend. Logically speaking, this was almost impossible, but now it had happened. "Leave 2 people behind to intercept this blood fiend with me. The other 3 go kill them." Seeing that Grey and Viscount Fergus had rushed over, she immediately ordered. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Upon hearing her order, 3 people immediately retreated from the siege and pounced toward Grey and Viscount Fergus. Ha! Facing the 3 people who pounced on them, Grey and Viscount Fergus didn't hesitate to use their wind blades. The space in the corridor was narrow, which was very suitable for the use of blood fiends. Naturally, the 2 of them wouldn't miss this opportunity. Whoosh! 2 green wind blades attacked the 3 people from the left and right. The 3 of them simultaneously dodged to the left, and without hesitation, they waved the weapons in their hands and slashed at the wind blade on the left. Whoosh! The wind blade on the right brushed past them, while the wind blade on the left collided with the sharp blades in their hands. Crack! Although the blood fiend's ability was powerful, it still couldn't help but shatter like glass in the face of the all-out attack of 3 ferocious blood warriors. But at that moment, a bone-chilling coldness suddenly erupted. An ice-cold frost pervaded the air, spreading towards them. Suddenly, specks of frost appeared on their bodies. Not good! The 3 people's expressions changed drastically, and they all retreated hastily. Fortunately, they weren't directly hit by the wind blades, and only some frost appeared on their bodies because of the pervasive chill. At most, their bodies would be slightly stiff, but with the physique of the blood warriors, they could recover in a short while. Whoosh whoosh! However, Grey and Viscount Fergus obviously wouldn't let go of this opportunity. With a burst of terrifying speed, they quickly appeared in front of the 3 people, and the weapons in their hands slashed at one of them. Clang! The person who was attacked by Gray hurriedly raised the short sword in his hand to block the attack. The result of a hasty defense, coupled with the fact that the opponent was the extremely powerful Gray, was easy to imagine. He flew backward like a cannonball. Clang! Although the person who was attacked by Viscount Fergus was slightly better than the one who was attacked by Gray, he couldn't help but retreat because of his hasty block. Viscount Fergus chased after him. As he wasn't the primary target, the third person reacted. However, at this moment, Gray had already sent one of them flying. He freed his hand and slashed at the person with his sword. Clang! As the weapons collided, the person was also forced to retreat. Even though he had reacted, his body was still slightly stiff. Facing Gray, who possessed terrifying strength, he was still at a disadvantage. Whoosh! Gray appeared beside the person, holding a sword in his right hand and a dagger that was flashing with a dark green glow in his left hand. Clang! Using his sword to block the other party's weapon, Gray's dagger slashed past the other party's waist. Pooh! Blood splattered, but it wasn't red liquid anymore. The assassin's body staggered a few times before collapsing powerlessly. Green liquid also flowed out from the corner of his mouth. At this moment, the assassin who was first sent flying by Gray had already gotten up and pounced. Gray met him head-on. Pooh! Not long after Gray killed the first assassin, the assassin who was fighting with Viscount Fergus had his neck slit by Viscount Fergus's sword after being injured several times. Viscount Fergus already had the upper hand. In addition, the opponent's body was frozen stiff and his movements were immobile. Under such circumstances, there was no reason for Viscount Fergus to lose. After killing this assassin, Viscount Fergus besieged the assassin who was fighting with Gray. With the two of them working together, the third assassin was also killed. Damn it! Although she was fighting with the leopard-type blood fiend, the woman with the eye patch still noticed the battle on the other side. When she saw that 3 of her subordinates were killed, her face turned ashen. She had completely miscalculated. Not only was there a berserk-class blood fiend, but there were also 2 ferocious blood warriors. Moreover, the leopard-type blood fiend was even stronger than her. The leopard-type blood fiend's combat strength was no different from when it was alive. Furthermore, the blood technique she cultivated was more suited for stealth and assassination. Combat wasn't her strong suit. Failed. There was no doubt that the assassination had failed. Retreat, she shouted in a low voice. She held onto the handrail and slid down, jumping from the 2nd floor to the 1st floor. Pooh! The other 2 assassins also wanted to escape like her. Chapter 201. Bang! Falling from the 2nd floor, the woman with the eye patch nimbly steadied herself like a cat falling from a great height. Whoosh! Looking at her 2 subordinates who were stopped, she hesitated, considering whether she should turn back to save them. However, when she thought of the blood fiend, she turned around and rushed out without hesitation. That blood fiend was stronger and faster than her. If she turned back and was stopped by the blood fiend, it would be difficult for her to escape. Now that her 2 subordinates were holding back the blood fiend, she could buy time for her to escape. Thump, thump, thump. She rushed to the exit of the hall. Just as she was about to escape into the shadows outside, she came face to face with a rumbling sound. A 4-meter-long bull-shaped blood fiend with 2 horns on its head stomped on the ground and suddenly crashed into her. A second blood fiend at the berserk level. Her expression turned to one of shock, and cold sweat began to trickle down her forehead. With such a huge body, what else could it be but a berserk-level blood fiend? There were actually 2 berserk-level blood fiends in this small Fergus family. Whoosh! She quickly dodged to the side. Boom! The behemoth slammed into a nearby wall, creating a hole in the wall. Huff! She heaved a sigh of relief after dodging the attack. Fortunately, this blood fiend was not as fast as the previous one. Otherwise, she would have been injured if she had been hit head-on. Whoosh! She dashed out without hesitation. At this moment, the Fergus family was simply a blood fiend lair in her eyes. Whoosh! Right at this moment, a thick shadow suddenly flung towards her. She simply had no time to dodge and was already hit. Bang! She was sent flying and smashed into the ground. Her black clothes were completely torn and there was a huge and clear bloody wound on her waist and abdomen. Pfft! She felt a sharp pain in her waist and abdomen and could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, she saw clearly what had attacked her. It was a 5-meter-long crocodile-type blood fiend covered in yellowish-brown scales. It was definitely a berserk-level blood fiend. A third berserk-level blood fiend had appeared. Could it be that he had barged into a blood fiend's lair? He had actually encountered 3 mad-class blood fiends in a row. A family with 3 berserk-level blood fiends was actually just a Viscount family? When did the Viscount family become so powerful? At this moment, she finally understood why the 4 ferocious blood warrior assassins she had sent out half a year ago had failed and why none of them had managed to escape. Not to mention 4 murderous grade assassins, facing 3 berserk grade blood fiends and 2 ferocious blood warriors. Even if their numbers were doubled, it would still be impossible. The woman with the eye patch was about to break down. Assassinating the Fergus family was no different from seeking death. If she had known this would happen, she would have rather assassinated the Count's family than the Fergus family. However, she was an assassin after all. Her mental fortitude was incomparable to ordinary people. She forced herself to calm down, staggered up, and ran out of the castle without hesitation. A large number of guards had already rushed over, and this gave her a chance to escape. She hid in the shadows, avoided these guards, and quickly arrived at the city wall. Her hands were like sharp claws as she dug into the solid rocks of the city wall. She climbed to the top of the city wall and then jumped down. It was pitch black outside the city wall. This was her home ground. As long as she could escape into it, she would be able to escape successfully. At this moment, she finally heaved a sigh of relief. She glanced at the castle behind her, which looked like a blood fiend's lair, with lingering fear. She prepared to escape into the shadows. Just then, she stopped abruptly. With her night vision, she could not see any living creatures in front of her. However, with the help of the slightly dim light on the castle wall, she actually saw a huge monster looking at her with a pair of huge eyes. As the light was too dim, she could not see the color of the monster's scales. However, the huge silhouette was actually bigger than the 3 berserk-level blood fiends she had seen before. The 4th berserk-level blood fiend, had appeared. The Fergus family actually had a 4th berserk-level blood fiend. Seeing 4 berserk-level blood fiends in a row, even someone with a strong mental fortitude like her could not help but be slightly stunned. However, the berserk-level blood fiend in front of her was not. Bang! Its huge claws suddenly pressed down, pressing her to the ground, and poking several holes in her body. She struggled to lift the claws, but found that her strength was far inferior to the other party's. She could not break free at all. Her weapon hacked at the other party's leg, leaving only shallow wounds. While she was struggling helplessly, the huge head lowered and suddenly bit down. One of her legs was bitten off, and fresh blood splattered everywhere. After a short while, Grey and Viscount Fergus finished off the 2 assassins. When they arrived outside the castle, there was only a mutilated corpse left. Viscount Fergus's study. Grey and Viscount Fergus returned once again. In addition to the 2 of them, Bernal was also there. An assassin with the strength of a berserk warrior? Grey, are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Bernal looked at Grey with a pale face. Due to his lack of strength, he had stayed in the bedroom until the battle was completely over. Only then did he come out of the bedroom. When he suddenly heard Grey say that there was a berserk warrior among the assassins, he could not help but be greatly shocked, and his mind went blank. Berserk warriors, if placed in the Sydney Marquisdom, had the possibility of becoming a Count's family. Although not all of them could become a Count's family with the strength of a berserk warrior, there was no doubt that there was already such a possibility. And such an existence was actually sent by the Shadow Serpent to assassinate the Fergus family? If this was really the case, it was not difficult to imagine the Shadow Serpent's desire to kill the Fergus family. There's no mistake. The strength of a leopard-type blood fiend is not inferior to a berserk warrior. To be able to contend against it, this person must be a berserk warrior. Understanding Bernal's worries, Gray's expression turned slightly serious, and he nodded affirmatively. There shouldn't be a mistake. Judging from this person's appearance, he should be one of the 3 captains of the Shadow Serpent that young Master Zaloyan once mentioned. Viscount Fergus said in a deep voice. They even sent out a captain-level character. The Shadow Serpent really thinks highly of our Fergus family. Bernal smiled bitterly. Indeed, this time, if not for Gray possessing that magic weapon, the Fergus family would definitely have been finished. Viscount Fergus also had a lingering fear in his heart. Father, then what do we do now? Should we report this matter to the Sidney family and ask for the Sidney family's support? Bernal's face was filled with anxiety. Being targeted by an assassination organization that had once been the enemy of the Sidney family, but had not been destroyed, his heart was filled with anxiety and fear. No, it's best to conceal this matter. Viscount Fergus pondered for a moment, and then shook his head. A magic weapon that can control berserk blood fiends is of great importance. Although with my understanding of the Sidney family, they should not go so far as to snatch it, it's still better to be cautious. Then what about the Shadow Serpent? Bernal was anxious. Viscount Fergus shook his head slightly, looked at Gray, and asked. Gray, what do you think? I agree with Father's point of view. We should conceal this matter. Although according to common sense, the Sidney family should not snatch the magic weapon, we should still be careful. Gray naturally agreed. After all, he could not take out such a magic weapon. If the Sidney family wanted to see it, then it would be terrible. As for the Shadow Serpent, after the last and this time's losses, I think they should not make a move against the Fergus family in the short term. Speaking until here, Gray paused slightly. Moreover, the 4 blood fiends I control are all berserk blood fiends. Even if 2 ordinary berserkers come, I have the confidence to contend against them. That's good. Hearing Gray say that he could contend against 2 berserkers, Viscount Fergus and Bernal heaved a sigh of relief. According to the Sidney family's information, the Shadow Serpent only had 3 captain-level characters. Now that one of them had died, even if there were more assassins, there should not be more than 2. It was still within the range of being able to deal with them. As for the barbarian blood warriors, the 2 subconsciously did not think about it. Putting aside whether the Shadow Serpent existed for the time being, if such a thing really happened, it would be the same whether they reported it to the Sidney family or not. The Sidney family would not send a barbarian blood warrior to oversee the Fergus family. Okay, it's decided. Viscount Fergus made a decision. Everyone is tired today. Go and rest first. Chapter 202. Somewhere in the kingdom, the old man with malicious eyes was sitting in the main seat. His face was so gloomy that it could drip water. After a good while, he opened his mouth and said, Leona is dead. What? Hearing his words, the purple-haired man stood up in surprise. The short brown-haired man was also shocked. Leona with the strength of a berserker was dead? How could this be? Even when facing the encirclement and suppression of the Sidney family last time, there was no loss of berserker. This time, assassinating a small Viscount family, they actually lost a berserker? When Leona took the assassination mission, they didn't think about the possibility of the mission failing. However, even if the assassination failed, in their view, with Leona's strength, she should be able to escape. This was also the reason why they didn't worry about Leona going to the assassination. But now they actually heard that Leona was dead. Their first reaction was disbelief. Sir, could it be that the news is wrong? The short brown-haired man's eyes widened. He didn't believe it or didn't want to believe it. Assassinating a small Viscount family, How could a berserker be killed? This was really too unbelievable. He was more willing to believe that Leona was temporarily unable to contact the organization for some reason. It has been confirmed many times. It can't be wrong. The old man shook his head. His face was extremely ugly. It was not only the two who didn't want to believe it. Even when he first heard the news, he also thought that the news was wrong. After repeatedly confirming it, he had to believe it. Leona with the strength of a berserker was dead. Not only her, but the assassins with her also couldn't escape. How could this be? Could it be that they were ambushed by the Sidney family? The purple-haired man's face was full of surprise. But how could this be? Half a year has passed. How could the Sidney family not withdraw? This matter is indeed strange. However, this is the only explanation that makes sense. The old man said with a gloomy face. Whether it was him, the purple-haired man, or the short brown-haired man, they never thought that this was the power of the Fergus family. It was really too hard to believe. Killing a berserker was something that even a count's family would find difficult to accomplish. As for a viscount's family, they definitely wouldn't believe it. From today onwards, all members of the Shadow Serpent are not allowed to step into Sidourney Hill, nor are they allowed to accept assassination commissions related to Sidourney Hill. After a long while, the old man with a malicious expression made a decision and gave the order in a deep voice. Yes. The purple-haired man and the short brown-haired man both nodded in agreement. From the beginning to the end, neither of them mentioned anything about avenging the eye-patch woman, Leona. On the one hand, they did not have the ability to do so. On the other hand, they did not have a close relationship with the eye-patch girl, Leona. Assassins were cold people, and they were more wary of each other. They didn't have much friendship with the woman with the eye patch, so naturally, they wouldn't put themselves in danger for the woman with the eye patch. 1 month later, in Fergus Castle, as expected, the assassination of the Shadow Serpent did not come. Instead, another matter caught them off guard. The Herbs were robbed and Lord Corgi was killed? Hearing this news, Grey was stunned at first, then a cold, murderous intent suddenly appeared in his eyes. Lord Corgi was a person that Grey had met a few times. When Grey was passing through Marquis Oka from Sidourney City, he had taken a ride on the Fergus family's caravan that was transporting herbs. He was a person that was easy to get along with, and he had given all the money he had collected from the robbers to Grey. To a certain extent, Grey owed him a favor. Yet, such a person was already dead. Moreover, he was killed by the robbers. This made him furious. How could this be? Bernal's face was also filled with surprise and anger. Lord Corgi had the strength of an upper-level blood warrior. Could it be that more than 2 upper-level blood warriors joined forces, or perhaps a murderous blood warrior was involved? I don't know. All the guards were killed, and there were no survivors. Viscount Fergus shook his head with an ugly expression. Father, there are more than 2 upper-level blood warriors, or perhaps a murderous blood warrior. Such a bandit group is rare in Sidourney. Could it be a noble force in disguise? Bernal was bewildered. It was common for nobles to disguise themselves as bandits and make huge profits without any capital. Based on the current situation, this possibility was very high. No matter if it is a bandit or a noble force in disguise, they must pay the price. Viscount Fergus's eyes were cold. Grey, I hope you can go and find the bandits or forces. No matter what, don't hold back and kill them all. But I'm not good at tracking. Grey frowned slightly. The abilities that he had were not good at tracking, and he had not specifically learned how to track. If he found the culprit, it would not be a problem for him to act, but tracking was a little difficult for him. Viscount Fergus seemed to have thought of this long ago, so he said immediately, "Don't worry about that. I'll let Baron Harry, who is good at tracking, follow you. You just need to act last. Then it's no problem." Grey nodded. Since he was only responsible for acting last, of course, there was no problem. This bandit might have a murderous blood warrior. Bring the leopard blood beast with you," Viscount Fergus continued. "Okay." Grey nodded. Out of the 4 blood beasts, the leopard blood beast was the easiest to take. As for the other 3 blood beasts, they were too big and would cause too much noise. The next morning, Grey rode away from the Fergus family with a short and fat man and a few guards. The short and fat man was Lord Harry that Viscount Fergus mentioned yesterday. Other than that, there was also a leopard blood beast following behind them. This was their final trump card. If Grey could take care of it, then it would be the best. If even Grey couldn't do it, then they would have to use it. They didn't bring too many people. If Grey and the leopard blood beast couldn't do it together, then it would be useless no matter how many people they brought. The guards they brought were only responsible for logistics and sending messages. Tap, tap, tap. Considering the leopard blood beast, Grey chose to travel on a secluded path. Although Lord Harry was confused about why Grey did this, he didn't ask. They stayed in a village for the night. A day later, Grey and the others arrived at the place where the caravan was killed. The bodies of the guards had been cleaned up, but there were still traces of a battle. There were dried bloodstains, arrows that had fallen to the ground, pieces of leather armor that had been hacked off, and even broken weapons. All signs pointed to the fact that a brutal battle had taken place here. "Lord Harley, please track the whereabouts of the robbers and see if you can find them." Green looked at Lord Harry and said, "Yes, young Master Grey." Lord Harry replied and dismounted from his horse. His attitude was very respectful. Although Viscount Fergus hadn't announced it in public, how could he not guess that Grey had been selected as the successor of the Fergus family? Therefore, he was very polite when facing Grey. Besides, Grey was an upper-level blood warrior. He was even stronger than him now. He couldn't help but be polite. Under Grey's watchful gaze, Lord Harry began to search the vicinity. He either squatted down to observe the footprints or reached out to touch the tire marks. After a while, he stood up with a frown. "Lord Harry, how is it?" Seeing that the other party seemed to have come to a conclusion, Grey asked. When the bandit retreated, they cleaned up their tracks. However, they left with several carriages carrying herbs. Some of the tracks couldn't be completely cleaned up. "I can try to follow them." "That's good." Grey let out a sigh of relief. It was good that they could follow. He was afraid that they couldn't. He didn't know what kind of force robbed the Fergus family's caravan, but he didn't care. With his strength and the leopard-type blood fiend hiding in the dark, he was confident that as long as he could find them, he would be able to destroy them. What he was afraid of was that he couldn't track them down. Even if he had the strength, there was nothing he could do. He finally saw where his weakness was. He hoped that he would have the chance to meet a blood fiend with tracking abilities in the future. The few of them walked and followed the tracks. A day later, a city appeared in front of them. The city walls were more than 10 meters high. The huge city gate was completely made of metal. It was majestic and majestic. Although it was slightly smaller than Sydney City in terms of scale, it should still be a city with a permanent population of more than 100,000.